Hello everybody, and welcome into my latest live broadcast. Today it is the 29th. I had to look and make sure. It's the 29th of December 2022. Today is Thursday. My name is Kerry Holzman, and we are just 2 days away from the end of 2022 and off to a fresh start in 2023. Welcome in everybody into the chat room who's been eagerly awaiting the broadcast. I can see some of you jumped in there early. I'd like to see that enthusiasm. And thank you, of course, out to Planet Cryos, who's given 2 super chats even before I went live here. One for $2 that says, "I'm here, so now the party can start." Well, yeah, we were waiting. We might have had to postpone. And then again with a $10 super chat, he says, "I just built a 13900K computer for a viewer, and I shipped it to him. Just shipped it to him. It is blazingly fast, and I had fun building it." His YouTube name is Bud3236. I don't know if he's ever in here, but I figured I'd give him a shout out. Very cool, Planet Cryos. Also, thank you for all your contributions. Not only your super chats, but also the video that you shared with us of doing a computer build. I'd be really curious how much you paid for that 13900K? The cheapest I've seen them is $599, which is preposterous since the retail price is supposed to be $589. And since it's been out a couple months, you'd think that would have come down. I kind of have this $500 rule on CPUs. I personally won't drop more than $500 on a CPU in general. I mean, there may be occasions where, you know, that's not where I make exceptions, but that's gotta be because the money, I'm making more money, or something was on sale, or the customer's ordering it and that's what they want. I've just lost too much money on CPUs over the years, especially on the AMD CPUs. And, you know, those things, they depreciate real quickly. So I hate to spend more than $500, me personally. But we've seen him, Planet Cryos building. He knows what he's doing. He does great work. And if you haven't checked out Planet Cryos' YouTube channel, you can click on his name there and it should take you to his channel. Or, of course, he's always welcome to post a link to his channel. Show a little love and subscribe to him. Help him grow his channel, and he's got great content besides. All right, today I am going to review the Asus ROG Rapture GT-AC2900. Whew, that's a mouthful, isn't it? This is a gaming router. There are effectively 3 tiers of consumer-based routers. I don't want to get into the enterprise routers. We have entry-level, mid-range, and high-end. This is going to fall under mid-range. Now, mid-range, you're looking right around you're looking around $200, right in that ballpark. This router is like $130 normally, and they had it. Amazon had it on sale for $89.99. So I thought, well, I need this like I need another hole in my head. But I thought, you know, I'll give it a shot. And if I don't like it, you know, I can always return it. So let me go over to the Amazon page here. We'll take a look at the product specifications and why I decided to purchase this router. How is this different from other routers I've shown you guys? So let me go over to my screen share settings here in OBS. Let's see, we'll go to that button right there and this button right here. There it is. Okay, now we should be able to see the screen. And this is it here, the Asus ROG Rapture Wi-Fi gaming router, dual band gigabit wireless internet router, approved by NVIDIA Geforce Now. There's some marketing. It's got the Aura RGB. Yeah, this router has RGB on it. It's designed for gaming and streaming. And when I say streaming, I don't mean like you're streaming something to you, but rather you're streaming something out to the internet. It is AiMesh compatible. We'll talk a little bit about that. That is a proprietary Asus standard. So it only works as a mesh router with other AiMesh products from Asus. And it has their lifetime internet security that Asus offers. I never use it. But it's up to you if you want to use it. It's completely free. Other companies like Netgear and TP-Link will charge for similar services. Sometimes they charge for parental controls on some routers, like Ubiquiti will do that. So in any event, this is what the router looks like here. Look through the attached photos. Not open, that's of course for gaming. The fast, that's going to improve your gaming performance. That's ideally what makes this a gaming router. And this talks a little bit about the AI protection, lifetime, free commercial grade network security. Somehow I've managed to have fine network security with good security practices and don't need that, but it's a nice add-on for you to try out. It's no additional charge, and it's not like I said, other router manufacturers that will charge a monthly subscription fee for that similar service. As we scroll down here, of course, there's a couple of different packages and even a couple different routers down here. So we're looking at the ROG Republic of Gamers ASUS gaming router. You'll see it's on sale right now at $122. Well, that's not prime though, is it? $122.59. Let's scroll down. Now check this out. New and used from $75. Now, when it was $89, I'm not going to save $14, you know, and worry about if there's anything wrong with the used one. One thing some people don't quite get, well, I talk about finding some bargains on Amazon by looking what's in the Amazon warehouse, and this one right here says it's from Amazon warehouse. There may be something wrong with the router, just so you know. A lot of times they'll say small cosmetic imperfection. I have looked all over every single used item I've purchased from Amazon warehouse. I've never seen one with it, even though it says it's got an imperfection. I've never seen it. But what I have encountered are routers that are a little bit flaky, where sometimes they just drop the connection for no apparent reason. Now, I will say that if you have a router that drops your connection randomly, the first thing I would do is change the broadcast channel, because it may be getting interference from something. I had a neighbor, well, basically what happened was my internet started dropping every time my neighbor started his car or came home from work. And I didn't realize that pattern. I just knew it was working great all day, and then all of a sudden it stopped working, and then a few minutes later it was fine again. Sometimes my neighbor likes to sit in his car and talk on his phone with the engine running. I don't know why he does it. We all have our things. So the whole time he's in his car carrying on a conversation, my wireless is all messed up. So eventually I started to realize I could hear his car and experience the Wi-Fi dropout at the same time. Well, come to find out, his new car has a hotspot built into the car. And that hotspot was broadcasting on the exact same channel I'm broadcasting on. All I had to do was change the channel. I've had a couple of routers, even at Studio A, where I thought the router was bad, and it would drop the signal, and I have to go in and manually change the broadcast channel. However, it's also possible the reason the person sent that router back was it's acting up. Maybe it's overheating or it's acting intermittently, and so they resell it. Amazon resells it. So if you get a router and it's dropping Wi-Fi, first thing I do is change the broadcast channel on whichever frequency, whatever band that you are connecting with. So if you're on the 2.4 and it's dropping, or is it dropping both the 2.4 and the 5 at the same time? Certainly worth your effort to change channels and just change them drastically. Don't just change it by one number. Go to one end or the other of the spectrum, or go to the middle for the channels that are offered for each band. And beyond that, if it still continues, you likely have a router that's intermittent. It doesn't mean that all those routers from that model are bad. It means that's likely why the person sent it back to begin with, and those kind of problems are very, very difficult to replicate in order to fix them. But that's why I always recommend you get, when you're making used purchases from Amazon, make sure they come from Amazon warehouse, or if you're going to purchase it from a third party, either make sure it's such a discount you don't care, because I've done that where it's like those TP-Link routers I did the other day, those were $35 a piece from a third party. They took longer to arrive than standard Amazon packages, and I don't even know what the return policy is for this third party, but it ain't worth my time to send back a $35 router. So right now, all the Amazon returns that were purchased, anything purchased in December from Amazon here in the US, you have until the end of January to return it. So I've got a couple of routers here I will be returning, such as the Netgear 6E router and the TP-Link 6E routers. Those 6E routers are just a waste of money for me. If I had fiber optic internet, if I needed a 10G Ethernet input, then I'd be in heaven, and that would explain why there's so much money. But to add those features is adding hundreds of dollars onto the cost of the router. So those go back in the box, and those go back to Amazon. It costs me nothing to return them. I'll ask Amazon to apply it as a credit on my account, and I will use that to buy more stuff to use here on the channel. So before I get to unboxing, let me just take a look here in the chat room and give everybody there a shout out and a hello. Especially Find Me in Hawaii with a $5 super chat. That's Ken. Ken emailed me the other day. He picked up one of the Netgear RAX 120, one of the returned or used ones. And it actually arrived a couple days early for him. And he's got it hooked up and he's loving it. That's awesome. Bob R. with a $10 super chat says, Happy New Year, Carrie and chat. Well, thank you, Bob. Thank you. And Happy New Year to you. Of course, I will be back during my regular broadcast, Fridays at 1 o'clock, and then Saturday at 1 o'clock, Mitch Morrison will join me for a New Year's Eve broadcast. Where it's just going to be a get-together. That's all it's going to be. There's no work. I mean, if you have questions for us, we'll do our best to provide answers, but I'm not going to have a bunch of show notes and links and things. It's other than to say we can reflect back on the year and look forward to the coming year. And that's going to be the whole point of that show. Today, I am going to try and keep it around, I try to keep all my broadcasts around the 2-hour length or less. The show the other day, when I was showcasing the big Nook Xi7 computer, that one went just over 4 hours. But boy, there's some really good content in there with finding the drivers, how to apply them if you ever have to do a reinstall, showing which M.2 slot was the Generation 3 and which one was the Generation 4, and how I could tell both through the Crystal Disk Mark test and the Samsung Magician software. But that Samsung Magician software won't help you if you don't have a Samsung drive. What else can I tell you about? There was a sale on Team Group NVMe drives. I wonder if it's still going on. Let's see. It was $274 for a 4 terabyte NVMe drive. So I just want to check and see if the sale is still happening. I did post a link to it in my YouTube posts. I don't know if many of you see the YouTube posts that I create. But it looks like the Team Group, let's see, let me share my screen again. Here we go. So this drive right here, it's 5-year warranty. It's a 4 terabyte. Now look, this thing is not a rocket ship. This isn't going to be a super high performing drive. I've always said, if you can get a terabyte for $100 or less, that's a pretty good deal. And these prices are getting lower and lower. It shows they still have 16 of these in stock. Now this is no slouch. I don't mean to say that it's slow, but it is not the fastest drive. Like, is this Gen 3 or Gen 4? Okay, this is a Gen 3 drive, so it runs actually right at the top end for the most part on the reads that you can expect from Gen 3's, limitations. And if we scroll down, I think somebody's got a screenshot of Crystal Disk Mark performance, and it was like at 3,500 on the sequential reads. Let's take a look here. Keep scrolling, Gary. Keep scrolling. Here we go. So this person did the work for us. 3,550 on the reads, which is about as fast as you're going to go on Gen 3. 2,500, nearly 2,600 on the sequential writes. So that is no slouch. So that's a really good deal. I don't know, what's the normal price on this? Let me scroll it back up. It says it's only 6% off. It's still a good deal at its normal price. Yeah, that's well under, oh, and the numbers here that they predicted pretty much match what the person's test did. And yeah, so if you're looking for a nice, large, affordable, yeah, believe it or not, this is affordable, 4 terabyte NVMe drive, that's a really good deal. And again, it does have a 5-year warranty. As for the reliability, I don't know. I can tell you the Team Group SSDs I've been using, I think I've seen, no, I haven't seen any bad ones. I've got a couple bad ADATA ones, but again, very, very few. And there is a 5-year warranty, which is pretty standard for most NVMe drives. So we'll just put that out there for you guys if you're in the market and looking for a deal. Let me bring myself back here. Okay. Back over to the chat. Planet Cryos with a $5 super chat says, I'm not sure what the 13900K cost. He bought all the parts and shipped the parts to me. I will possibly share this video with you to post after I get it edited. Hey, we'd look forward to that. I'd love to share it with everyone. 3D Everything with a $10 super chat says, hello. Hey, thank you, 3D Everything. Right on. And of course, hello to Kevin Crowley and Mats Olav Rickardson. Welcome into Corey Liddell and Larry Wood and Mortant and Flipper Flop, Peter VZ and William Smith. Hello to Starshine and Richard Collin, The Greek, Patrick Rousseau, our good friend Luke Greeny and Thomas Backenstow. Hello to Charlie Rogers and Edgar Sains. Hello to Garfield Rupe, Craig Lilly, Nick Poverman, William Dawson, David Martinez, Peter Parker, aka Superman the Hero, Leslie Cavins, Zvi Manor, Travis Fitzpatrick, Pat Lynch, Timothy John Kelly Stewart, Zdravko Frankovich, Peter Meyer, Captain Blinsky, Dean Summersheim, Matthew Burden, Arto Rusenin, our good buddy Oystein, joining us from Norway, Ron Barnish, Hugh W., Darren Gilholm, Sarge Tech, LRCX, Kenny Whidden, Carlos Hernandez, Michael Mancini, Mark Baggett, TWC Codster. Think I got everybody? Sorry if I missed anybody there. I hopefully got everybody. Flip or flop? Oh, it looks like Corey had asked a question. Let me scroll back up and find that question. Carrie, this is from Corey. Carrie, is a guest network the same as a virtual LAN? Also, you got any content on network security? Well, some basic network security. Remember, I'm trying to keep a channel devoted to just regular folks, not technical people, although sometimes we do reach a little bit of technical stuff. I will say I recommend Network Chuck if you want to learn about network security. There's no end to network security. If you go down that rabbit hole, you can spend the rest of your life boning up on network security concepts, protocols, and ideals. So if you want to deep dive into that, check out the channel Network Chuck. When it comes to basic network security, just being behind your router's firewall, making sure you've enabled or left alone your Windows firewall, which is on by default. I don't recommend any third-party firewall software unless you are an expert and you know what you're doing. And I don't recommend any third-party PC security software other than Malwarebytes, the paid version, paired with Windows Defender when you're behind a firewall without any open ports, without poking any holes in it. You might do that to get outside access into your router. If you choose to do that by installing that doorway for you to go through, it's effectively a doorway somebody can pick the lock on. So I very cautiously will tell you that if you want to engage in creating your own cloud, I would personally rather see you use something like Microsoft OneDrive or Google Drive. But if you want your own cloud, using something like a Synology NAS, or at the very least, if you're going to use a router, absolutely make sure the router has its latest firmware, and make sure you got a really, really good password. It's got to be at least 12 characters long, a mixture of upper, lowercase, special characters, and numbers. So it's kind of a pain in the butt. But the bigger the pain in the butt is for you to log into it, the harder it is for the hackers to hack into it, unless you haven't updated the firmware and there's some exploit that's been around, and then they just bypass the password altogether. And obviously, if you click on a link where they trick you into giving them your password because you think it's official, well, you just handed the keys over, so then it doesn't matter how strong your password is. A VLAN, a virtual LAN, is not the same as a guest network. All a guest network is doing is creating access to the internet to a device without giving it any access to any of the other computers or resources on the local area network. So if you have a friend coming over, or your friends, say you got some kids, and the kids bring their friends over, they all want to hook their phones up to the guest network or to the Wi-Fi, you give them the Wi-Fi to the guest network. That keeps them off of your stuff. It isolates them all by themselves with, you know, their own. And I have landscapers here, so pardon the background noise. Virtual LAN, that's a very different thing. That's for segmenting a network. Without getting much into it, I don't use VLANs. I don't support them. None of my customers use them. It's typically something used in large-scale business, and people that are home hobbyists that are sort of experimenting around. It is overkill security to segment out a LAN on a home network, and even on most small businesses, is completely unnecessary and totally overkill. And it overcomplicates things when it comes time to figure out when things aren't working, and you got to deal with VLAN configurations and smart switches and stuff like this. You got to log into the smart switch. You need a name and a password. I hope you remembered it. Anyway, I don't deal with that, but again, if you want to learn that level, definitely check out Network Chuck. Just go to YouTube, search, type in Network Chuck as one word. I think it's one word, and you'll see his page. Okay, let's take a look here in the chat. Whew, that's loud. Let's see. Randolph joins us in the chat and says hello. Just scrolling to see if I missed any other questions before I begin the unboxing event. Jeremy Kramer with a $20 super chat contribution says, hey Kerry, long time no see. If you had a preference when it comes to motherboards, who do you find is the most reliable company-wise and the least reliable? I don't really have any problem with reliability from the big four, right? The big four motherboard manufacturers are Gigabyte, Asus, ASRock, and MSI. Overall, it's, in my experience, they're all about the same in reliability. I prefer Gigabyte motherboards. That's my personal preference. I have to support what I sell, and I have to support it indefinitely. So I'm gonna pick a motherboard family of boards or a manufacturer of boards, and I'm going to familiarize myself with them very intimately. And the minute I switch to a different manufacturer who does things differently, support gets harder for me because I have to figure out how that manufacturer does things in a way that I'm not used to. So by sticking with one brand name, I get to know what to expect from that manufacturer, how their BIOS is laid out, where to get support when I need it, or firmware updates and things like that. So for me personally, for the bang for the buck, performance for the dollar, a gigabyte across the board. I find MSI quite often to be too expensive, and I find that the time it takes them to post is a little bit longer. It might be a couple seconds longer, at least on the boards I've used. I like ASUS boards as well, but they tend to be a little bit pricier, and I don't care for the BIOS layout. I don't care for the way that the RAM installs, how they've labeled it. You know, A1, B1, A2, B2. So you use A1 and A2 first? No. Then B1 and B2? No. So A1 and B1? No. A2 and B2? Yeah, if you only have two modules, you use A2 and B2 first. Who? What? So yeah, I'm not a fan of that. So again, getting support, or rather giving support to a specific manufacturer that I know well is more profitable for me. So I don't think you can go wrong buying a board from ASUS, ASRock, MSI, or Gigabyte. Find the one that works for you. They're all reliable. If you have to support it, if you're selling hundreds of them like I do, and you're selling 25 MSI boards and 25 ASUS and 25 ASRock and 25 Gigabyte, good luck to you supporting that, because you're probably going to end up with a lot of ticked off customers when you have to research every problem that comes in. So that's the reasoning, and that's really boils down to preference. It doesn't boil down to, let's face it, if any of these manufacturers were unreliable, they'd be out of business. So that's something to keep in mind. But thank you for the contribution. Thank you for the question, Jeremy. Matthew said he's used both ASUS and Gigabyte, and he hasn't had a problem with either one. Yeah, I'm not surprised. Jeremy says, thanks, Carrie. I just built my own PC. Right on. Is that your first one you've ever built? There's my friend Ron Hilliard joining us in the chat. Hey, Ron, good to see you, my friend. TWC Codster in the chat says, Carrie, I have this router right now, and I absolutely love it. It fits my needs. I had to manually update the router first before I could turn on the auto updater. Yeah, well, we'll go through that. Depending on how long this has been sitting on a shelf. When you get a motherboard or a router, that's always going to have the latest firmware on it when it was made. So if it was made 6 months ago, and then in the last 6 months it traveled, went from Asia to the United States and then into a distributor's warehouse, and it eventually wound up at your front door, let's just say, or you went to the store and pulled it off the shelf. It could be 6 months or longer since it was built. And there may have been a new firmware or multiple newer firmwares that have come out between then and now. So you always want to make sure when you get a new motherboard or you get a new router, or even if you get a new digital camera, look to see if there's a new firmware update for it. And it's very easy with routers. We'll go through how to check. With motherboards, I've got videos already showing you how to do that. And with cameras, well, I've never covered that before, but you would just type in the make and model of your camera, followed by the words firmware download into Google, and make sure you go to the camera manufacturer's site. Do not download firmware from any third party for anything unless you want to risk damaging your device. So, well, a firmware update is really beneficial. You know, these firmware updates cost a lot of money to pay a programmer, to pay a developer or developers to update. And then they have to pay another developer that takes care of their website to add it to the website. And then they have to pay for the bandwidth for you to download it. And they do all that for free. Why would they do that for free? They do it for free because it's considered important, whether it's security, feature enhancement, compatibility. You know, with motherboards, there can be updated BIOSes that make it more compatible with other RAM that prior to wasn't working right. With cameras, it can make the autofocus faster. It can offer features like Wi-Fi connectivity that the camera maybe was advertised with, but wasn't ready for prime time by the time they shipped the camera. And the only way you can access that or other features like that is through a firmware update. So firmware, BIOS, it's all sort of the same. It's different words effectively meaning the same thing. and they cost you nothing but your time. So yes, I do have landscapers here right now. I apologize for the noise. It won't be very long. Sarge Tech said his Pentax DSLR had 2 firmware updates. Yeah, in most cases, you only need the latest firmware update. So if you're missing a couple, you just get the newest one. Unless the newest one says you must have a, this prior version minimum. That does happen sometimes for some things, like AMD motherboards might do that. You very rarely see that on Intel boards, but it could happen, right? These videos that I make, they're going to be up for years and years and years. So in 2022, this is how things are, but who's to say what things are like in 2026? I don't know. My crystal ball doesn't work that well. So, yeah, those are leaf blowers going on out there. Again, I appreciate your patience. We'll get through it. Bob R said, I noticed you use a lot of Team Group RAM. Yes, Bob, because it's really good. I've had some bad luck with Corsair Vengeance RAM. I've sent back more Corsair Vengeance RAM that's gone bad than any other brand. I haven't had to send back any Team Group, I don't think, maybe once. But if we go back over to my Amazon page, and let me share the page with you again here. We'll go, right here, we'll type in Team Group Elite DDR4. Look at the prices on this. First of all, I like the color. It's silver, so it pretty much goes with all motherboards. It's low profile, so it's not going to interfere with the installation of a heatsink. Here it's $77 for 32 gigs at 3200 megahertz. And I don't see any need to go faster than 3200 megahertz. Probably not going to notice it. And we might even be able to find it cheaper. They have a couple different memory modules that they sell, like this Elite Plus. A 64 gig kit at $174.99 is not bad. There's a 16 gig kit at 3200 megahertz at $44.99. You see they have a lot of different designs and different timings, and of course, whether it's a kit of 64, a kit of 16, or simply a kit of 8. And then there's this other company, this OLOY. I haven't used much of their stuff. One of the reasons is it's a bit tall, and I can't see any reason for that. It can interfere with the heatsink installation. Now, of course, that is 16 gigs, and it's a little slower at 3000, but OLOY, I've used their RAM, and I haven't had any problems with it, but I haven't used a lot of it. So let's see how much 16 gigs of OLOY will run. Oh, we were just looking at it. $44 is a good start point. And then what about 32 gigs? Let's type in 32. So it's only like $1 cheaper than that Team branded memory. And again, I don't like the height. I have used this Blade. This is pretty attractive RAM, but I don't know why is it so much money. It's RGB and it's 4000 speed. That's a lot of money for that RAM. This RAM is way too tall. That RAM's too tall. So I'm always thinking about the height of the RAM. And if you've seen some of my build videos, you've seen me struggle. I don't want to go through that again. PNY, I don't use anything from PNY. Avoiding Kingston, and I avoid Crucial when it comes to any type of storage. Like I say, with the bad amount of Corsair Vengeance memory I've been seeing lately, I'm avoiding it. I probably sent back half a dozen. I probably had a half a dozen returns of Corsair Vengeance memory in the last 2 years. That's way too many in my opinion. And you know what? They charge a bit more for it because it's name brand. So why not just stick with Team Group? It runs exactly the same speeds. And so far I've had very, very few problems. And I even include compatibility issues in that. So I know for a while there I was really pushing on that Corsair Vengeance. I have installed a lot of it in the years, but now I can get a better deal with RAM that's exactly the same specs. And we'll just have to see if I see the same kind of reliability issues that I've run into with the Corsair Vengeance line. But that's why I switched. I got to stay in business. It doesn't make me look good when a customer system starts blue screening and then they call me to fix it and it's a warranty issue. Let me go back over to the chat room. Forbin wants to know, for RAM, isn't the thoroughness of the quality control checks important? That's what I thought Western Digital was promising with its black premium line, more quality control checks. Well, when we talk about quality control, everything is more or less automated these days in factories. So we've got machines doing all the work. They don't have bad days. They don't sabotage the company because they're upset and they want revenge. They just work and they do the exact same job precisely. They can operate 24/7, rarely requiring a day off for maintenance. They're never in a bad mood. They're never not paying attention or not focused on the job. So when it comes to quality control, the concept of having something need quality control checking is less now than it was, in manufacturing in years past. Second, just as I mentioned with the cost of support, if a company's manufacturing something where it's got poor quality control, they have two particular issues. One is with the internet where everybody can share their experience, it can sour their reputation online. And, when we're talking about computer equipment, your customers are online. And if they're telling other customers, man, everything I bought from them lately is broken, they got a PR problem on their hands. The second thing is, well, it's under warranty. It costs them money to honor that warranty. So if they're not putting enough time into their quality control, let's say it costs too much money, and then they're going to have to pay it on the back end after you've bought it and it failed, and then deal with the potential bad PR if it's affecting a lot of people, plus the added cost of whatever it is to replace the bad unit, which is far more expensive than just better QC. Most QC these days is all automated, and the way that they make products today, I would encourage you to just simply watch any of my videos over the last 10 years and see how often I've ever received a dead on arrival product or a damaged product. It's very rare. I will also say that no matter how much quality control the manufacturer puts into whatever it is they're manufacturing, they cannot control how it is shipped and how it is stored in warehouses. If the warehouse isn't temperature controlled and the device sits in freezing cold or super hot temperatures for long periods of time, if the people that are moving the product around are throwing it to each other, like you see people load luggage on an airplane, they just toss it around. If everybody handles it properly except the driver who brings it to your door, who just flings it out the truck up to your door like it's a newspaper, there's nothing the manufacturer can do about that. So it's in a manufacturer's own best interest to make sure the products are going out with the least likelihood of them returning. But what happens in distribution, they can't control. So as a result, it's not really fair to hammer down on a manufacturer because of what the distributor did or what the retailer did. So just bear that in mind. There's no such thing as a perfect world. There's no way you can ever avoid all bad products. They all will be covered under a warranty if you're buying them from reputable retailers like Amazon or Best Buy or B&H Photo or Newegg. They will honor their returns. You just send it back to the manufacturer. I wouldn't necessarily be upset at the manufacturer. I would think the retailer did something, either getting to the retailer or from the retailer to you. It likely was working when it was shipped from the manufacturer. So you let it go, get another one. I mean, I bought new LED bulbs, put them in, and, I buy them in 6-packs. And at Studio A, I need 6 bulbs, and I can't just buy one or one is brighter than the others. I have to change them all out. And then suddenly one burns out. They're supposed to have a 10-year lifespan. But look, I don't know if somebody at Home Depot was knocked to the ground, picked it back up, put it back on the shelf. It's not the manufacturer's fault. It's not Home Depot's fault. And that very well could have happened. So when it comes to quality control, the marketplace will decide if a manufacturer survives, and they're going to do whatever they have to do as far as pricing, and to get their prices competitive to make the consumer enticed to want to buy it, as well as making a product that has features they want, along with having a product that isn't going to put them out of business in the costs of sending out new units. Nobody repairs anything, so when it comes to these routers, ASUS has never made a router in the history of the company. They engineer the routers. They design them, and they go to a factory in China, and they say, give me a bid for how much it would cost to make X amount of these routers. Obviously, the more they make, the cheaper per unit they are, and either the more profit it is for them, or the lower price they can offer it to the consumer. And so when one of these goes back to ASUS for a warranty issue, ASUS does not fix them. They simply send you another retail box router. So they build in a certain number of extras, and they have to keep that during the warranty period. If they run out, so let's say your router's right towards the end of its warranty and ASUS doesn't have any more and they don't fix them, the warranty always states they will, and this is from any company, they will send you an equivalent product that is equal to or better than what you had, but is in stock. And this was a pretty big deal during the pandemic when, inventories ran low and distribution issues were really bad. So that's just industry-wide, that's how all that works. Now, if I were to go to Amazon and look up some of these no-name brand manufacturers, let's take a look at that right now. Let me go back to Amazon here. I'll share my screen. Okay. There's a router manufacturer. Well, here, I'll just type in wireless router. There are some manufacturers here I'd never heard of before. So when I look at these routers and I'm focused on price, I see this one, Ray, and it seems like a really good deal. $149. There's $40 off. That'll be $109. It's Wi-Fi 6 AX 3200. That's very inexpensive. But what kind of support am I going to get from this company if I need it? Who are they? Are they spying on me? Do they have some kind of, look, it's got good reviews in here. But when we talk about support, I would be worried. I would buy one of these for the channel, but I would not use it other than for testing. I just don't trust it. This Griffin, I don't know who Griffin is. They may actually be a bigger manufacturer than Ray. There's also one called Tenda. And these are like super cheap, bottom of the barrel prices. Yeah, here's a Tenda router for $37. Who is Tenda? I'd never heard of them. Once again, they have a smart app and all the specs look good, especially at that price range. However, do I want to rely on my internet access with a no-name brand, at least not a popular brand here in the United States, where I don't know what kind of support I'm going to get? How are they going to honor the warranty? Maybe they will, maybe they won't. This thing's got almost 15,000 reviews and overall 4 stars. That's pretty promising. But until I actually get one and live with it, and this is all their products they've got here, I would be very reluctant. Like this Wi-Fi card, probably a decent Wi-Fi card, but what would happen if, let's say, a new version of Windows comes out and they don't provide a driver, even though there's nothing wrong with the card, what do I do? So if I stick with a name brand like TP-Link, ASUS, Netgear, I know there's going to be drivers for it. I mean, that's not even the latest Bluetooth, which is 5.3. And I'm sure all this stuff is very, very inexpensive for what you're getting. When it comes to like this Smart devices, whoops, let's go back up here. Like these plugs that you can turn on and off with your phone app, if they shut down their servers, if they go out of business or they decide they don't want to support it, then these plugs are no good to you. So if you're investing in home automation, stick with name brands. I can't emphasize that enough. If you aim for what is cheapest, it's fine as a temporary solution. Just know it's going to be temporary, because in some cases, these companies just vanish one day and your app won't communicate with the server, and now these are all no good anymore. And that's happened to a number of people, including Best Buy's own smart home system. They closed it up, and so those devices no longer have any support, and pretty much you need to replace them. I would hate for that to happen with a router, and I would hate to have to try and figure out how the heck I could, where do I have to ship this thing? It would be a whole new learning experience to figure out how I would get the unit replaced if it needed warranty replacement. So these are things to think about when you're making your purchase, when you're also, so fixated, most people are fixated on that price. But you are perhaps trading a few dollars for rolling some dice. Is this going to be okay? Or am I going to have problems? And if I have problems, are they going to be easy to resolve with the manufacturer? The only way to know for me personally would be to start using them and putting them in service. I have no motivation to do that. Apart from making some content for the channel, I'd rather see you spend 20 or 30% more on an equivalent router made by a name brand and have peace of mind. So regardless, if you're ordering from Amazon, the returns are easy in that 30-day return window. But what happens after that? That's the big concern. So if you decide to buy one, you'll have to share your experience with us. Let us know if you like it, if you don't like it, and why. Oh, I think my landscapers are done. Richard has been a member now for 7 months. Right on, Richard. Thank you for being a member of our tech club right since the beginning. That's awesome. Let's see. Nick Poverman says, I love my TP-Link router. It gets firmware updates automatically, and I can set them up to check for updates and apply them while I am sleeping. That's a nice new feature I'm seeing added to routers lately from Netgear and Asus and TP-Link. Someone in the chat room thinks the video was out of sync. Is the video out of sync for you guys? Are my lips matching the audio? I've seen that happen when somebody's computer is, they need to refresh the page for their computer to sync. Randy Phillips says his new computer is still hanging in there. Well, I'd hope so. Hopefully it will hang in there for a number of years. Jason Willis says, I am in sync. Everybody's confirming it's in sync. Yeah, so if you're watching a video and the lips aren't matching the audio, one of two things is happening. One, you've got Bluetooth headphones or Bluetooth speakers and they just have a delay. Or two, your browser needs to be refreshed. So you need to refresh, or you need to close the browser, reopen it again. That should fix any sync issues you have. SM9 in the chat wants to know what my opinion on 4800 megahertz RAM for DDR5. I never had problems with 3200 on DDR4, but now everyone seems to say 4800 megahertz is not enough. I've only installed DDR5 once, so I don't have much experience with it. What everyone says is never what everyone says. That's a very, so people do this all the time. Nobody likes that. No, you don't like it. Or the people you talk to don't like it. So therefore now everybody. So no, not everybody agrees. However, depending on what processor you have, if you've got an AMD or an Intel, and specifically which model, and specifically how you're using the computer, may or may not make any difference. That's really an individual thing. It's sort of like it's almost like comfort. How do you define comfort? Somebody getting a massage might say, hey, that feels really good. And somebody else says, wow, that really hurts. It's the same massage. People get it maybe more sensitive than others. How we define what we value is very unique to us. So the best thing that I would advise you to do is take a look at, let's say there's a particular application or a particular game that you spend your most amount of time with on your computer. Look up which RAM is recommended for the motherboard and processor you have. And that's what I would use as my guide. That being said, if you want to go above that and see if it has any impact on you, it doesn't matter what anybody on the internet says. What matters is what your experience is. Somebody else's experience is mostly meaningless. Might be interesting, might be entertainment, but it's very often not useful for you personally. The only way you really need to know, or the only way you're going to know rather, is you need to just buy it, put it into use, and then measure it against what you know. Measure it against the cost difference, measure it against any performance difference, and then conclude for you if that was worth it or not. And then come back and let us know. Matt Zoloff says he's watching me on his television set today. Right on. Let's see. Flipper Flop says there's no observable difference between 3200 and 4800. Even in games, the difference is small. Yeah, again, people will chase benchmarks, but it depends on the game. It depends on the person. I put some 4K video up on a projector, and I'm looking at a 4K video from YouTube, and then I'm looking at a 1080 video. I can't see any difference. So I bring over my nephew, who's still a teenager, and I say, can you tell me which of these videos is in 4K? And he absolutely nails it every time. And I asked him, I said, what are you seeing that I'm not seeing? And he's like, I don't know how to describe it, but the 4K one is just sharper. The 1080 looks a little blurry to me compared to the 4K. Okay. Well, you know, I have a set of 54-year-old eyeballs. I can't see it. So would it be worth it to me to invest in a 4K big screen TV, let alone an 8K? I'm not seeing it. And especially like on cartoons, Family Guy, The Simpsons, I can't even tell 720p from 4K on that stuff. So it's so individual. Until you actually see it and experience it, you will then be able to determine if there's value for you. So regardless of Flipper Flop saying there's no noticeable difference, or if there is, it's very small, that very small difference may be worth it to somebody else. On the other hand, probably most people won't see any difference, but it depends on the processor and it depends on how they're using the computer. Some applications and some games will benefit more, some won't benefit at all from the speed of RAM. I guess the question is, what are you trying to accomplish? Are you having a problem with your computer now? What do you think putting faster RAM in is going to do for you? That may be the bigger question. My friend Ron says, Cliff is happy that the internet box is out. So if you guys watch the IT crowd, they're teasing a boss about, you know, she's the boss of the IT department, but she doesn't know anything about computers. And they tell her that this little box they made, which is just a plastic box with a blinking red light on it, they tell her this is the internet. It's a funny episode. If you get a chance to watch the IT crowd, you can search it here on YouTube. Type in internet IT crowd and you'll see the little clip of it. And my friend Cliff helped me out with this, because all I did is I bought a blinking LED at Radio Shack with a project box back when Radio Shack was still alive. And I thought, well, this thing should blink for years. And all I did is hook 2 AA batteries directly to the leads of the flashing LED. Simple project. But the batteries died like within 6 weeks, sometimes sooner than that. So I asked my friend Cliff, who very much knows electronics far more in depth than I do. He says, oh, we just need to build a little circuit. So I bought the parts. They were like $3 in parts, and I got a set of of 2 batteries that are D size. I almost said double Ds. Anyway, this thing, we put a sticker on the back of it so we could keep track of how long the batteries last. And let me show you the sticker. These are the original D batteries. There's 2 D batteries in there. Well, the lights are so bright in here. Let me try it another way. Let's try it this way. I may be too far for this to work. Not sure if you can read that. But we put the batteries, well, Cliff put the batteries in this on the 9th of April, 2019. And he wrote 11 a.m. And it's been, there's no off switch, right? It just sits there and it blinks. And we're still on the same set of D batteries on that thing. I recently saw this episode of the IT Crowd, and it reminded me I should grab that from Studio A and bring it over here. It's pretty funny. Matt Soloff says the video quality is just perfect. Hey, right on, Matt Soloff. Thanks for the feedback. I'm going to still work on making it better in the coming year. Dan Nelson said he saw that episode of the IT Crowd yesterday. It's a funny show. It's a very funny show. Star Sign says I watched the IT Crowd, a few of them over Christmas. It's a funny British show. Ron Barnish says maybe you need glasses. Well, hey, Bron, there's no doubt. There's no maybe. I do have glasses, particularly for reading. My regular vision's fine. In fact, I just got back from the doctor's appointment last week, so I'll have some new glasses coming. I'm up to a 2.5 on the magnification now. It's getting worse. Bob Thompson in the chat says, Carrie, can you help me solve this problem? When I'm opening a tab, the new tab is already halfway scrolled up, and I have to scroll it back down. Try a different browser. So if you're using Chrome, try Edge. If you're using Edge, try Chrome. See if it happens universally. And then, of course, if anybody in the chat has any suggestions there for Bob, feel free to put in your suggestions. Pete Unwin jumping in the chat there, saying hello. Raza wants to know if I have a favorite motherboard manufacturer. Well, I think if you just look through my videos, you'll see one manufacturer appears more than others. It's not about favorites. I don't go off of my feelings. I'm going off of what sustains my business. So you can rewind this live video. We've talked about that already. And of course, I encourage you to go back and look through some of my computer build videos I've done over the last 10 years. And I think it'll be very obvious to you who my preference is for the sake of business. And I don't do anything different for myself than I do for my customers. I want to eat the dog food I make. So if I've got a different motherboard than my customers, I'm doing it to be a guinea pig to see if that's a viable alternative to recommend. But for the most part, I want to use the exact same equipment I am selling so I can be ahead of any issues before they occur. And I'm familiar with the equipment when issues do occur that I can get in there and get right to work without having to do much Googling and research. But thanks for the questions, guys. Nick Poverman said that it was the IT Crowd Season 3, or Series 3, Episode 4. Yeah, those 3 seasons, I think they did a total of 4 seasons, but the first 3 were fantastic. And then there's a couple of Christmas specials too, I think. There were 2 of them. All right, well, we're an hour into the broadcast, and I have not done what the title of the video says I'm going to do. Let's go ahead and unbox this ASUS router and take a look at what we got and conclude whether or not I would recommend it. Once again, when we talk about a mid-range router, that is ideally the minimum people will use. You get these really low-end routers, I hope you have very simple needs. I hope you're not very demanding. I hope you're not too particular. I hope you don't need fast speeds or great coverage. Start with a mid-range. It'll likely keep you much happier for a longer period of time. Make the investment of spending, say, twice as much than you were planning on, jumping from low end to mid-grade. And when you're in that mid-grade, it'll last you longer. It'll be more useful to you. One doesn't last longer than the other. The electronics are going to last as long as electronics last. But how useful this becomes over time as you add more and more Wi-Fi devices, or if you move. Now you've moved where you're in a location now where that little router isn't cutting it anymore. So now you got to buy another one. By the time it's all said and done, you will likely spend more money and spend way too much time trying to stay at the cheap end. And doing that is, so people say, well, I don't have the money to afford the mid-range. No, you can't afford not to get the mid-range in most cases. The people that keep scraping the bottom of the barrel are the ones that generally have the most problems. They will spend more time and more money fixing it over the course of ownership, however many years that is. And it would have been cheaper if they would have originally bought something more middle of the road, spend twice as much, set it up, and you're good even when your circumstances change. The mid-range router will likely serve you if you're moving, you're in a different location. In most cases, it is a purchase that you will appreciate when you stop and think about how long you've been using it without having any issues. When we buy these cheaper routers, these $35 routers, I hope you're a technical person and you know exactly what to do when they go down, and understand that if they run into issues because you're adding too many Wi-Fi devices and things start bogging down, you did this to yourself. So I can't tell you what you should buy that's going to make you happy, but as a general rule, if I'm consulting with somebody, I am almost never going to recommend the cheapest thing. I'm going to find something kind of in the middle. And if the customer is very demanding, then of course we go right up to the top shelf. So just food for thought to set your expectations accordingly when you're shopping. When you spend less, you're going to get less. But you can find products like this, the higher end stuff that's returned. You check Amazon daily for that because the inventory will change frequently. You can also find renewed versions of routers. And I would be cautious about buying any storage or RAM that's returned or used or refurbished. Just like I wouldn't buy a returned set of batteries. I don't know how much the batteries have been used. When it comes to a hard drive or a solid state drive, I don't know how much write life is left in it. So those items I won't consider buying used. But routers, maybe a motherboard, but it would have to be a specific board, not just any board. If I'm buying a used motherboard, or if I'm buying anything used, you may have more of a limited warranty, like 90 days instead of a year or 2 years. And you might need a little more technical background to work through some things. For example, a used router might have something configured in it from the previous owner. So you have to have the technical mindset to know, for example, how to reset the router to clear out any existing passwords or settings. So if you're a novice, if you're a beginner, don't try saving your money and buying used stuff, because you could get yourself well in over your head and end up just having to return it and just buying a new one. And all you did was waste time and postpone having something done, checked off the list. If you are technically minded, then of course you know what you're getting into when you buy used items. Either way, the used items from Amazon, if you're buying from Amazon warehouse, they have a 30-day return period regardless. But I would strongly advise, if you're a novice, if you're just learning, stay away from used equipment. So with that, like I said, this was on sale for $89. And so to save $14 to get it returned or used, not worth my time. But at today's price, what is it, 100 and something today? Suddenly now it's a $35, $40 price difference. Then it'd be worth it. So that's how the justification works for me. All right, so here we go. Let's open up, see what we got inside. We've got quick start guide and a support number to call if you have any problems. We've got the router itself. This is pretty nice that it's not one of them large, big beasts of a router. Right there. We've got a power cable. No, that's an Ethernet cable, a power adapter. We have a screwdriver. Why do we have a screwdriver? Oh, I know why. This has a little base. This router, well, it can be laid flat like most routers. You can also set it up with the antennas pointing up with this stand. And I'm going to guess that little screwdriver is to secure the stand to the bottom of the router. Now, I'm experiencing this for the very first time. I keep all my videos as real as possible. I don't do, in most cases, I don't do any research. I'm going to buy it, take it out of the box, and start using it. And when I have problems, I'll refer to the manual. I find that most people do not read the manuals. They're too anxious, they're too excited, and they think, I don't need to read it. And so I do the exact same thing. The difference is I'm a professional computer technician, and most of this stuff, you know, after you set up a few hundred of these, you start to see the similarities. However, there may be features that any device has that you don't know it has. So you get this thing up and running and you're happy, and then maybe one day you're bored one afternoon or one evening and you pull out the directions just to amuse yourself, and you find out this thing has a feature you didn't even know it had that you want to use. Okay, let's see here. These, it's a little tiny power adapter. They always come wrapped in plastic. You really need to remove this plastic because it can, well, first of all, it'll yellow and it'll look really ugly. Secondly, it can prevent this from cooling off properly because it's got a little insulation on it. It's just for packing, right? So when you unpack it, remove any plastic that's on any of the devices. Some people are like, oh, I don't want to remove any of the plastic. That's going to keep it looking new. Well, that's wonderful and awfully thoughtful for the next person who gets it. But it is not intended to be used with the plastic on. So does this go on only one way? Yes, the stand, there's a little notch here, and it looks like the screw goes towards the bottom. We're going to put that on like so. And now I need my glasses because I can't see what kind of screw head that is. You take a quick look. It's a standard Phillips. So what do we have a driver for? I don't know what this is for. Oh, they got a little rubber cap on it. It's a Phillips screwdriver. Seriously? Now don't over tighten, just snug it up. Documentation, don't need that. Yeah, that's cute. They get that little cover on there. Put that back in there. Get my scissors out of the way before I poke myself. And now we can put the antennas on, which I have right over here. And I'll bring this up to the camera so you guys can see it better. Oh, we got some buttons over here. What do we have? We have the need for glasses is what we have. Oh, let me see. What does it say? WPS. Okay. Turn the Wi-Fi on or off. Reset. Boy, that reset, you can push it with a finger. That's a little too easy to push. You can turn the LEDs on or off, and you can cycle the RGB color pattern with that button, or turn the lights off altogether. That's just an on-off button for the LEDs on this. So there's like there's an LED here that lights up on an angle, as you can see from the picture on the Amazon website, and then the ROG logo lights up. And they have different patterns for that. You'll also notice that the stand can be mounted back here, and that would be if you wanted to have the router laying flat and you pick it up off the ground a little bit. Or if you, it looks like, I was going to say if you wanted to hang it on a wall, but no, that doesn't. I suppose you could put a couple of nails in your wall and hang it, but it's a little heavy. I don't think I would do that. So these antennas, I'm just going to screw these on. They often do not ship with the antennas screwed on because they can break in shipping. And when you buy a router that doesn't have removable antennas where they're fixed, you'll notice it's packed a bit differently to make sure those antennas won't get damaged. So it doesn't matter which antenna we put on which connector, they're all the same. There we go. And one last one here. So I'm looking at the back to see what kind of connections we have back here. And I see we've got a power input here, an on-off switch right there, a USB 2.0, a USB 3.0, our Ethernet WAN connection, that's where a modem is going to plug in. And then we've got 4 LAN connectors, each one with what appears to be lights. Are those lights? That's not normal. No, I don't think those are lights. Normally we'll know the status. Well, this doesn't show us the status of the LAN. Interesting. Nothing on the other side. There's no switches or anything here. It does appear that the only lights it's got on the front with regards to status is the little globe icon that tells you if it's got access to the internet. The 2.4 Wi-Fi radio is on when that lights up, and the 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi is on when that lights up. So for most people, you're going to see these 3 lights light up. If your internet suddenly doesn't work and you look here and this is red or turned off, then you know your problem's at your cable modem. And there's nothing you can do in your house to resolve that other than reboot your modem. Anytime you reboot your modem, always reboot your router at the same time. Now, let's plug in the internet. We're going to use the little mini PC here, the little Nook. I'm going to plug into the blue port here. Then I'll use a little patch cable to run from any of these 4 ports, doesn't matter which one. And we're going to plug it in for our setup here. And I'm going to go ahead and turn this on, and we'll flip it the other way. And since I'm going to have it upright, I want the antennas up. I kind of like it better this way. Yeah, that's more visually appealing to me. Oh, before I can turn it on, I have to give it power, don't I? So I better do that. Getting ahead of myself as usual. Let me turn it back off because I don't want to shock it. So we'll plug that in right there. Now I can turn it around so you can see it. And we'll plug this in down here. Let's see. That ought to do the trick. And now, still not used to where the buttons are. Power button is right there. And that may take about a minute or two to initialize. And while we wait, let me clear off some space here. Hopefully we won't need anything else in this box. Well, that's booting. I'll go ahead and boot up the little Nook over here. We'll get that started up. And let me take a look in the chat room, see what's going on here. David Mugali says he's joining us from Uganda in East Africa. Well, welcome in. We don't see many people from Africa joining us in any part of Africa, so that's always cool. Welcome in. TWC Kotster says, I love my router hanging on the wall. I have the stand hanging on 2 nails though. Yeah, well, whatever works. Zach Store says, Amazon has a $200 Asus router for 30% off right now, 35% off. The GS-AX3000, wouldn't that one be better deal right now? I don't know, which one is that? The GS-AX3000. GS-AX3000. Oh, okay. Let me share that with everybody. So this is the ROG Strix AX3000, Wi-Fi 6. Got a dedicated gaming port. Is this a better router? That's a good question. I mean, if we're going based on price, this router sells for a few dollars more MSRP. It looks like it can handle a bit faster of Wi-Fi speed, but that assumes that you're connecting it to Wi-Fi of that speed. Otherwise, it doesn't really benefit you. I would say, let's see, do we have any used ones here? New and used from 102, that's not much savings at all. So at 129, that's a tough call. I mean, personally, and this is just my perspective of it, I think the router I have looks better. I don't really like the look of this one at all. But would it benefit you to have it? It's only got 1 USB port instead of 2. So it's a little less in that scenario. As for AX3000, this one's AC2900. If you wanted more future proofing, I'd say yes. But if things aren't planning to change anytime soon, again, for me, the difference is very minor. So yes, technically it is a better router in the sense of the Wi-Fi. You've got 4 antennas instead of 3. Your AX3000 instead of AC2900, so there's a minor difference there, but you're 1 USB port instead of 2, so depending on how you use it and what you find to be of value to you, They're pretty darn close to the same, with the one I've got being a bit older. So yeah, I don't think you could go wrong with either one, to be honest. But if you see yourself needing that AX3000, then absolutely buy it. Let me go back to camera one and back over to the chat. It's a fair question. I appreciate you asking there, Zach Store. So Dravko Frankjevic contributes €5. He says, Carry, memory, DDR4, 3600, 32 gig, C18, Team Vulcan Z, 2x16. What is this C18 in the name of the RAM? Others have different numbers. So that's the CAS latency. Sometimes it'll say CL, CL18, CL22, CL20. So the CAS latency, when combined with the memory timings, give you the overall performance of the RAM. Sometimes people look at those memory timings that are much more aggressive, but then they have a slower CAS latency. Other people look at the faster CAS latency and ignore the timings that are slower, and they're almost, a wash one way or the other. For me, if I see really inexpensive memory, I think it's probably got really slow CAS latency. So I will take a look and see if that falls within the same range of the name brand memory I was considering buying. Obviously, if you're adding memory to your system, you want to buy the exact same memory if you can get it. Otherwise, whatever the slowest RAM is, all your RAM runs at that slow speed. So you're not necessarily saving money by saying, oh, I've got 16 now, I've got 2 empty slots, I'll just buy 2 more 16, and they don't match on the timings and they don't match on the CAS latency. Whichever one is the slowest, if it works, will slow the whole system down to that slowest memory speed. So ideally, if you wanted to upgrade 16 to 32, you would take out the 16 and put in a matched pair of 32. So when the memory is sold, it's sold as a kit that is guaranteed to work together. Otherwise, you're rolling the dice and the price you pay may be in performance. You might plug it in and go, hey, there's my 32 gigs. And of course, things work a little faster because you have more memory. But at the same time, they're not working as fast as they could have because you're actually running at the slower speed of the older memory, or you slowed down your old memory to the new memory you bought. That's what happens when people focus only on the price. And then they'll be blissfully happy in ignorance, not realizing that that RAM is not performing to its full capability. No differently than the other day when I plugged the NVMe drive in, that Samsung 980 Pro, I plugged that in to the Gen 3 M.2 slot on that NUC XI7 system. And of course it works fine, but when I ran Crystal Dismark on it, I was getting Gen 3 speeds. I was like, Now I wasn't feeling Gen 3 speeds. I couldn't tell. But if I've got 2 slots and it's just a matter of moving it over 1 slot, why not put it in correctly? So when I moved it over to the other M.2 slot, verified we were at Gen 4, and our speeds, doubled, more than doubled. How that affects, our everyday uses depends on how the machine is being used. But if I'm building a computer for somebody, that's part of what you're paying me to do, is to make sure that everything is running at its optimal speed, not just working. A lot of people, they build their own computer and they get it to work, so they conclude they've built it all correctly. But it's not uncommon for people to have things misconfigured where, yes, the machine is running reliably, but it's not running at the performance level that you paid for. It's sort of like your internet connection. You might be getting 100 megabits down from your internet provider, but you may have an old router or an older computer that can't pull down that speed. But you're still paying for 100 megabits whether you're using it or not. And you might think, well, my internet's fast enough. That's fine. If you're happy, you're happy. But just be aware, you may not be taking advantage of what you're paying for to its fullest by holding on to old equipment and trying to save money. You're just paying for it in a different way. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe we're not talking about CAS latency here, because I haven't looked at the page, but I'm looking at the comments in the chat, and he's seeing like C18, C16, and as far as I know, there are no CAS latencies that low of DDR RAM. So they're talking about scrolling through the chat here to see what I'm missing. Flipper Flop said C18 indicates the type of memory chips that are used on the module. Well, this is all news to me. Let's take a look. Bear with me here just a minute, guys. I'll be right back. Sorry for that. I had a package arrive and I wanted to get it in the house. It's for what I need for tomorrow's video. I don't need it sitting out by the front door. Okay, so where was I? We're talking about C16, C18. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's right. That is determining the that is the correct answer to the question. Thank you for correcting me. I misunderstood the question. Wasn't looking in the details close enough. I don't really think it matters. When it comes to buying memory, I don't pay attention to that. But here, learned something new today. Michael says, Carrie, I got an Asus ROG Strix GS-AX3000. I absolutely love it. For Christmas, I also got a Logitech MX Master 3S, and I'm getting an iPhone 14 Pro. Sorry, Carrie. Hey, buy whatever makes you happy, man. Devious D in the chat room says, I purchased an Asus RT AX88U off Amazon. It was $300. I couldn't afford it, but Amazon offered a 5-month payment plan. So for $60 a month, I could get it and pay for it a few months down the road. Yeah, well, that's true. It's another way to be able to afford it. And then, you'll probably have it a long time. It's a good router. It's a very good router. Nick Poverman says, C16 RAM responds to data requests at a speed that is 2 clock cycles faster than C18 RAM. Nick continues, as I remember, that's how he remembers it. You know what, I'm going to have to research this a little bit more, but it sounds like what they're saying in the chat room, it sounds right to me. It's not something I pay attention to when I order RAM. I'm looking at CAS latency, I'm looking at the speed of the RAM, and I'm looking at how much RAM, the size of it, and I'm looking at how much it is. So those are the things I keep in mind, along with who the manufacturer is. But a fair question, what is that number? Obviously, they're putting it there for a reason. It matters to somebody. SM9 in chat says, I used to have an RT AC88U and Asus dropped firmware support so quickly. So many issues with Wi-Fi dropout. It put me off investing in Asus routers again for the future, unfortunately. Well, how come everybody else with an AC88U doesn't have these problems and doesn't, you know what I mean? Like, I love the AC88U. It's a great router. I don't have drop-offs with it. I think you either got a bad router or you need to be on a different broadcast channel. I don't think it has anything to do with firmware updates. Otherwise, there'd be a flood of people. I'd read about it on tech sites talking about this bad product, but there's a reason why people aren't talking about it. There's a reason why the one I've been using is what I'm happy with. I'm not being paid by ASUS, nor have I ever been. I purchased this router as I purchased an 86U. I've also got an 88U, and they all work flawlessly. So maybe you got a bad one, or maybe you need to be on different channels. But as far as firmware updates, it is an older router. The 88U is a couple of years old. I wouldn't be surprised if ASUS stopped updating it. But if you're one of those people, you could probably get the Merlin firmware, something like that, and put it on there. But I don't think you've got a firmware problem. What you're describing sounds more like a channel broadcast problem or a wireless radio problem in the router itself, but not universally impacted by all AC AX88Us, just the one you have. That's what it sounds like to me anyway. Sarge Tech says, when benchmarking, we're back to the RAM, C16 performs slightly better than C18. However, you may notice differences between both RAM during gaming in comparison to regular usage. Interesting. He says ASUS dropped the firmware, they dropped. DVSD in the chat says he's got an AX88U and ASUS literally just did a firmware update within the last month. Okay, that's good to know. Corey wants to know what my thoughts are on the Asus TUF Gaming AX5800. Let's see, I've got an AX6000 here. What is the AX60? What is it, 5800? There's so many routers. 5800, 5800. How come I don't find that? Let me go back and look at that chat again. Am I mistyping it? What are my thoughts? ASUS TUF Gaming AX5800. This keyboard has some keys moved around I'm not used to. I see an AX5700. I'm not aware of a router that's the TUF brand. The TUF brand I thought was just motherboards. Is that maybe not offered here in the United States? I can't find it. If you have a link to it, well, you can't post links in the chat. But there should be a model number like RT, well, that's probably what you're saying, RT dash, no. AX5800 is part of, it's part of the model, but they'll have like an RT dash number. Maybe I can look it up that way because I don't see anything called an AX5800. Al Perez joins us in the chat, says hello. Welcome in, Al. There is a difference between an AX88U and an AC88U. Yeah, for sure, right? I wasn't even aware there was an AC88U. AX will imply that it's Wi-Fi 6. Zach Store says the AX5800 looks to be available in Korea and China. Well, I'm sure if it's from ASUS, it's a good router. It's probably very similar to what we're looking at. So as far as what my thoughts are on it, I would assume that it's probably a good mid-range router. DVSD in the chat says, I've been tempted to buy the Nighthawk router from Netgear, but my experience with Netgear is they don't support the routers as long, or they come out with a version 1 and a version 2 of the hardware. Well, this is true, but I'm not quite sure how important these firmware updates are on a newer router. Like if you're getting a router that's been built within the last 2 years, the firmware update on it I wouldn't be worried about until the router gets to be about 6 to 8 years old. At that point, unless something drastic comes out where there's a known exploit, then that's a different story altogether. Most end users never update their routers, and they've had, routers for 10 years. They haven't changed a router, let alone ever did a firmware update on it. So while it's great that you guys want to stay on top of things, you have to understand it's costing the manufacturer money. So if you're spending $100 on a router, I wouldn't expect much in the way of constant firmware updates. If I'm spending $350 or more on a router, then absolutely those firmware updates better be coming for what I paid. So I think it's really in line with what you're paying. So a lot of the used stuff that I'm showing you, like this router here today, one of the reasons it's on sale is it was introduced like 2 years ago, I think. It's still sold today, it's brand new, but there are newer models available and they cost more. So it's a matter of finding where the best bang for the buck is. And it's not for me to tell you. I just want to show you what's available and what price range so you can have proper expectations. That's all. If you really want a manufacturer to kiss your butt and to always be there for you, show them the money. Buy their high-end equipment. And if they fail to support you on that high-end equipment, then I would say never buy from them again, or at least never buy anything expensive. If I buy a Mercedes or a BMW, I expect the dealership to treat me better than a Toyota dealership or a Chevy or Ford dealership. The more I spend, the better I expect to be treated. When I walk into McDonald's and the service is not very good, it's McDonald's. But if I go to Morton's Steakhouse and the service isn't very good or the food isn't very good, I'm going to be angry. If I'm spending $100, $200 for dinner, I expect everything to be clean, things to come out correctly, things to come out hot, for the order, to be correct, for me to not sit around waiting for a server to come and take my order, waiting for 20 minutes, like, am I invisible? So where that might be acceptable one place, where I'm not spending much money, it becomes unacceptable when I'm spending a lot of money. And I find that to be true in life. Spend more, expect better service, expect better support. Spend less, set your expectations accordingly. That's all. Let's sign into this router. Let's set it up here real quick. Let me switch over to, and thanks everybody for the questions. Zdravko contributed €5, says, Carrie, the memory, getting back to this memory thing, DDR4 3600 speed, 32 gigs of C18 Team Vulcan Z Gray. Oh, he's the one that asked the question. Okay, so sorry, I thought you were giving me information, but no, you're the one who asked. Yeah, looks like the lower that number is after the C, the faster the memory is. But whether or not you notice that at all, depends on your motherboard, depends on your CPU, and it depends on how you use it. Fair question, you got me stumped. I'll have to look it up. Okay, let me go now to this computer over here. There we go. And I gotta go full screen over here so I can see. Let's bring up the internet browser. This is a cached page. I don't think we can go out to the internet right now, can we? Let's see what happens. We haven't set the router up, so it shouldn't be connected online yet. And it's taking a long time, so yeah. Now, if we wait long enough, it might take us to the router setup page automatically. I'm not sure. We'll see it still get the spinning circle, or what looks like a toilet flushing to me up here in the left corner. And I'm just running out of patience here, so we can type in, yeah, so it canceled out. It did not take us to the router. And with ASUS routers, you can type in a web address, which I always forget what it is. Like for Netgear, it's routerlogin.net. For ASUS, it's something simple here. There's a couple different ways we can access it. Now that I put the stand on the bottom of it, it's covering up the sticker on the bottom that tells us. But what I can do is just do old school, which is to open a command prompt, do an IP config, and take a look at what my gateway address is. Gateway is 192.168.50.1, so I can just type that right up here. 192.168.50.1, and that will take us to the router login page. And that's true of all routers. You just look at what your gateway address is. But there's also a link we could type in, but I can't read it. I would Google search it, but I'm not connected to the internet to Google search it on this machine. So that's how I'm going to do it. We're going to create a new network, and this is our first time setup. I don't want to separate the 2.5 and the 2.4 and the 5. We'll keep them together. Then there's only one network name I need to set up, and it will smart connect your devices to whatever channel's the best one for you, or whichever one's compatible with your device. Now, with some older devices, they may not connect, and you may have to turn this feature off. You may have to separate the 2.4 and the 5. So just to keep things simple, we'll call this Rapture, since it's an ROG Rapture router. And for wireless security, I just type "this is my password." Don't use that, guys. I'm just doing this for the sake of moving through the video here. Bind one of the following functions to your boost key. When the bound function has been activated, the boost key's LED will turn on. So that's just a change. So we can make this control the LED lighting, which is shuffling through different modes of RGB, or we can enable the Geforce Now function, auto select channel using DFS channels, I don't know what that means, and enable game boost. Interesting. Well, I'm going to leave it as Aura Shuffle because that's what I thought it did anyway, but it's pretty neat that you can change that. Router login name, we'll just say admin, which you should not use. And I'm going to use the same password. This is my password. This is my password. Okay, the latest firmware is available. So it's automatically checking for firmware as we set up the router. That's one of the features you'll find for most modern routers today, is their ability to force you into a firmware upgrade rather than you having to know to do it. Netgear will do that, TP-Links will do that, as long as they're the newer routers. The older ones, even though they're sold new perhaps, if they're beyond a certain age, it's just not a feature they enabled on older routers for whatever reason, but it's pretty commonplace on the new ones. Of course, you can always go into the router settings and manually do the firmware yourself. But it's nice when it walks the users through, so they're always making sure when they're getting started, that they've got the best version of that router, the latest features, the latest security. And it says it's going to take about 3 minutes, so while we're waiting, I guess I can put camera 1 back on and put me in the corner here. There we go. Gary says he's not a big fan of ASUS laptops, but I haven't had any issues with their motherboards. I've seen some pretty nice ASUS laptops. When JJ would come over to Newegg for an interview, he always brought one with him, and I was always impressed by them. I don't think I've ever owned an ASUS laptop, though. They also make smartphones. Zach Store says, Kerry, I've had nothing but great experience with Gigabyte motherboards as I build several gaming PCs for friends and family every year. However, my friend swears Gigabyte is trash. What are your thoughts? Well, you know, everybody's got an opinion, right? So your friend can think whatever your friend wants to think. Your friend's not somebody I look up to, or your friend's not somebody I go to for advice. I'm a professional in the industry. This is what I do. If I run into another professional, like let's say Doug Betts, who's also been in the industry a long time, if Doug says something is recommended or not recommended, I'm going to listen with a more open mind. But when somebody's friend or cousin or uncle tells them something that opposes what I'm saying, what do I care? You know, they're welcome to believe whatever they want to believe. I've got a business to run. I can't run my business on feelings. I have to run it on what generates a profit and keeps my customers happy so I can stay in business. So it doesn't really matter outside of business what anybody thinks. But when I run into a peer and we have a conversation, I will tell you that when they're sharing their experience with me and their opinions, it carries more weight because of who it's coming from. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what you feel is a good value, what you're happy with, or what you think is trash, is just as valid as your friends. Now, when you're running a business and you've been running that business for a number of years and you've learned all these lessons about how saving money costs you money and how you can, you know, save money for a higher profit margin only to upset your customer who never gives you any more future business, how do you calculate that loss? And if I calculate a loss because of a manufacturer burning me, I'm going to be very, very upset with that manufacturer because they're jeopardizing my livelihood. So, you know, when I'm sharing with you my experiences, I don't care if you want to disagree with them or not. That has no impact on my real business. And at the end of the day, as long as my business is surviving, I'm doing something right. And it's nothing to do with anybody's feelings. So, but your friend is, sure, I'm sure your friend's not alone. I'm sure there's a lot of people that think Gigabyte is trash. There's a lot of people that think Asus is trash. Whatever the brand is, the more successful it is, the more likely people are going to be against it. So just keep that in mind. And at the end of the day, it's their money. And they're welcome to spend it on whatever they value. And you're welcome to spend yours on whatever you value. At the end of the day, you have to live with it, your decisions. I don't have to live with it. Your friend has to live with their decisions. Good or bad, doesn't affect me. Okay, let me take a quick look here what we're missing, or rather where we left off on this. Setup is complete. The router's current firmware is the latest version. Good, good. We'll hit next. Step 1, you've changed. This will result in wireless clients. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. You would go to, oh, I missed what it said. So now we're going to log in with the new name and password that we just set up. And this is what our interface looks like. And you can see on cheaper routers, you don't get all of these options, right? I mean, there's a lot of options in this router, a ton of them. And then within each option, like we click on LAN, we're going to have multiple tabs. So there's a lot to dig into here if you are into this sort of thing. If you're somebody who just wants to plug and play, you don't really have to go in and do anything here. But you know, you can set up a VPN in here. You can look at what did I just click on? Network Traffic Analyzer. Wow, that's pretty cool. It's got graphics. You don't often see that in a router. We can do a Wi-Fi site survey. That's cool. Wireless channel statistics. That's very useful when you're trying to figure out why things may be running slowly and your Wi-Fi is not going as fast as it should. OpenNet is good when you're gaming. And of course, there's a gaming profile that you can add for specific games here that you might be playing. The AiMesh system, which I will demonstrate in a future video, where any ASUS routers that support AiMesh can be connected together to form a mesh system without specifically buying mesh components or satellites. Gosh, there's so many things hooked up here. Wow. This router is chock full of features. The AI cloud, that's we talked earlier, if you want to set up your own cloud rather than using like a Google Drive or Microsoft OneDrive, you can make your own cloud. Plug a USB drive into the USB port of the router. I've already shown you guys how to do that on an ASUS router, and it's pretty much the same steps. Under administration, under firmware upgrade, we can turn auto firmware upgrades on, and we can just check one more time to verify that it didn't lie to us, that we do have that the current version displayed down here is the latest version, which it is reporting back. And again, just a ton of features across every one of these options here. For the most part, I don't really dig too much into this apart from setting the SSID and the password, which obviously I would not be using that password. That's just a really bad password. If things are acting a little wonky, it's kind of nice to go in here and take a look at ping and ping deviations and things of that nature. We can play with, like I say, we can change that key function right here. I left it at Aura Shuffle, but there's DFS channel, which is auto channel selection. DFS allows your router to utilize additional 5 gigahertz channels, providing greater bandwidth with less interference. Oh, well, that could be useful, although I don't imagine you need to press that very often. Game Boost, Trend Micro End User License Agreement. By using it, all right, just agree to that. So Game Boost analyzes your network traffic and prioritizes gaming packets, providing you with a better gaming experience. And GeForce Now, it's telling me the same thing. Select GeForce Now to prioritize GeForce Now gaming devices for a faster and better gaming experience. Okay, well, there you go. So that's what you can bind to that button when you press it on the side where you don't have to log into the router. Asus also has an awesome phone app that you can download for your Android or your iOS phone, which enables you to get to many of these router functions within the app on your phone, on your smartphone. And then we have different lighting things, such as letting us know when there's a login failure or if it's blocking an attack. It will light up in a certain way for being more than just pretty lights. They can convey events that are occurring based on the light. Close that out. Then we can have the light just be one steady color called static. We can have the light fade in and out like it's breathing. We can have it in rainbow mode where it just kind of cycles through the colors. Got something called Comet, which is like the light moving and changing color from one side to the other. Flashing mode, which I guess is good if you want to feel like you're in Las Vegas. Glowing yo-yo, that's sort of moving the light while fading in and out. That's an interesting mode. And then color cycle. I like Comet, but you could spend way too much time in there playing with the RGB. And let me go full screen back here on camera 1. And if I cut the studio lights, you might see that router a little better. That's the Comet mode. You will see it is cycling through different colors. Now, if you're in a bedroom or something trying to sleep with this thing doing that, you can reach over and hit the LED button. Well, the LED button, and can turn it off. Or we can use that ROG button to cycle also through the RGB modes, which is where? It's on my left, it's on your right. Oh, and even the button blinks the same way as the front does. And then there is an LED button. If I push that, it should turn the lights off. I think I need to hold it in. There we go. Push it again, it'll bring it all back on again. And the light on the side, very hard for you guys to see that, but it's doing the same color sequence as the front. All right, so that router's set up. It's ready for us to start using it. And again, we can set up an AiMesh. We can set up a VPN in there. If you're using like NordVPN or any of the other VPN providers, you can set up OpenVPN, which those VPN services provide you with OpenVPN service with a paid account, and then you would plug that into your router, and then you'd have VPN across all your network traffic on your whole building versus just the one that the VPN software is installed. By putting the VPN in the router for the VPN service you're paying for, setting it up as OpenVPN, then you don't have to put the software in any of the computers. But it will slow your connection down. How much so depends on how fast of a connection you got to start with and who your VPN provider is. So this is a good mid-range router. When we talk about mid-range, I'm talking about bells, whistles, and features, performance. There is an emphasis on gaming here. Not that you have to use it for gaming. Some ASUS routers have a gaming port. This one does not. The idea is if you have an ASUS router and one of the ports says it's a gaming port, that means any computer that's hardwired into that port automatically gets prioritized data transfers. Data packets are prioritized without you having to go in and turn QoS on or do any of that custom configuration stuff. Real simple, plug it into the gaming port. On this one, it looks like it's intelligent enough to identify gaming packets and to automatically prioritize them if you've got that feature turned on, the Game Boost feature. So something worth considering. The fast is going to be your biggest improvement on gaming. That's a third party that creates that, and it's put in, isn't it on this router? Does this router not have it? But if I was gaming and it was important to me, I would definitely want the what the fast feature. Yes, this does have the WT fast. I'm calling it what the fast. It's WT fast. Getting old, what do you want? I want to put the word the in front of everything. The Facebook. You've been on the YouTube? Yeah, nothing says you're old like putting the word the in front of, what do you drive? I drive the Ford. You're in social media? Yeah, I'm on the Facebook. Don't do that. All right, let me look in the chat room, see what's going on there. The Carrie Holzman, yeah, exactly. Michael Dane says, hey, that power supply you sent me a few months ago is still working great. I expect it's going to work good for many years, Michael, but I appreciate the update. Usually no news is good news. Blackwatch says, I wondered the exact difference of the NVIDIA Studio and game-ready updates. I mean, we'd have to get an official response from NVIDIA, but the idea is that the drivers are written for the studio driver to be more stable, and the game drivers are written to be higher performance, even if it means it might be a little unstable in certain games or under certain circumstances. That's the best way that I can explain it, but the actual technical difference of what they're changing, I don't know. Gary Tatum says he's got an old Asus RT N66U. That is a very old model. Wow. Definitely time for an upgrade. Your wireless devices will thank you. SM9 says, I think experience makes the best judgment. Depends how much experience. A single experience may not be an accurate experience. There's certainly been experiences I have where I really didn't have the patience to deal with something and might have prematurely concluded it's junk and I didn't want anything to do with it and didn't really give it a fair chance. On the other hand, there's also something to be said for a product being more intuitive to use where you don't have to... A good product should accommodate to the user. It shouldn't force the user to accommodate to it. So when we go back and look at some of the things that I've dismissed, they may actually be just fine, but they require familiarizing yourself with a different operational procedure than what has been industry standard or what my experience has led me through. And so that might pre-bias me towards not liking it if it means I got to go back and relearn something I already know because this manufacturer decided they could do it better. I don't have time for that in business. That time is money. So I will get very impatient when companies don't follow what is common practice unless there's a really, really good reason for it. All too often, companies these days are implementing different designs for no justifiable reason other than to try and make themselves seem different. But when you ask them, what does it mean? They go, it doesn't mean anything. It just means that we're not paying a license fee or we're not associating ourselves with this particular nomenclature. But it's the same thing, right? Yes. But we came up with our own name for it that we can copyright and protect and trademark versus using a name that the industry uses, which may not even cost them anything. I see this all the time. I see Be Quiet products in particular. They don't seem to have a good reason for turning those power supply connectors vertical, which makes it very difficult to use. I don't see a good engineering justification for that other than it's different. I see products where they just do something for no justifiable reason except to say it's different. And the problem when you're making it different is if somebody has to relearn or somebody isn't able to take full advantage of your product out of the box because it's not obvious, then you're not doing your consumer, your customer, you're not doing them any favors. If I had the luxury of just sitting down with one particular computer case and one particular router, and it always was the same every day, I would know it almost blindfolded. But being in the industry, seeing thousands of routers and thousands of different computer cases and motherboards, you start to find a common denominator among them overall. And when some manufacturer does something differently that no longer has what should be a common denominator that everybody else has, because they've renamed it or they moved it somewhere else, they called it something else, all that is putting a burden on me in support. So I don't need that. Unless there is a benefit to my customer or to me financially, I can't see any reason to justify having to go and learn to accommodate some manufacturer's product. They need to accommodate to me. Good software accommodates to you. Good hardware accommodates to you. This stuff, as it's evolving and growing, should be getting easier. it should be less and less important to have manuals. Things should be well labeled. Things should follow industry standard design. For example, almost all the modern routers are going to have a button for WPS connection and a button to turn the Wi-Fi off. Almost universally on all modern routers, regardless of who makes it, they will almost always have those two buttons. And when I see those two buttons, and one's labeled Wi-Fi and one's labeled WPS, one might be labeled LED, I know exactly what those buttons do without having to go to the manual. Now, if they've got a button on there that has some letters I don't recognize, I probably wouldn't even bother looking it up, to be honest. If the router does everything I need it to do, it's got the buttons I expect, plus it's got additional buttons, I'm not interested in the additional buttons. I don't care. So, in all likelihood, and there's no benefit for me to know that, especially if it's one router for one customer one time and I'm never going to see that router again. Anything I learn about it is going to be in and out of my brain in a matter of days as I take on the next job and the next job and the next job. So that's just a business mindset. It's not, I'm not saying that's universally the way everybody should see the world. It's just how I see what my perspective is from a business standpoint and the sheer scale of the amount of equipment I have seen over 32 years, whatever it's been. I've seen a lot of equipment. And it's all gotten much easier. It's all gotten cheaper. It's all gotten more powerful. It's all gotten smaller. But it all hasn't gotten as easy as I expected it to be by this point. So when manufacturers still overcomplicate something, not a fan of that. I'm sure there are people out there that like the nerdiness of it. Tick tock, tick tock. I just don't have time. Now, if there's a benefit to it, like if it's worth me learning about it because it's going to result in something that's going to end up with a happier customer or less support or some added feature that's beneficial, then it's worth the investment of time. So that's always a tough decision for me, whether or not learning something unique to a specific model, some manufacturer. In most cases, I can't be bothered. Like I say, there's got to be a reason for it besides just being different. Corey wants to know if there's any cleaning wipes safe to use on LCD monitors or screens. I do have a quick tips video on this. Basically, you just use a microfiber cloth that is damp, not dripping wet, and only water. So a nice clean microfiber cloth. I usually don't dampen the whole cloth. I'll grab like a corner of the cloth, run it under the faucet, wring it out so it's nice and damp, not dripping. And I'll use that corner and I'll wipe the screen with the damp corner and then use the opposite corner that's still dry on the microfiber and wipe it. Only use microfiber and only use water. That's my advice. LRCX in the chat wants to know, are there any settings that I need to set up on my Netgear before I connect it to my Xfinity modem? It's running on my shop PC right now. No, it should, unless you've changed it, it should auto, you can do, what I would do personally is I would reset the router. I'd push the little reset button in, hold it in until you see the power light. The power light will blink, keep holding it in until the power light either blinks faster or goes out entirely and then comes back on. Or just, it's going to have two behaviors. The initial blinking or reaction to when you hit the power, the reset. Hold the reset in until you see it, the light behavior change a second time. It's about 10 seconds, or just count to 10. Let that router reboot. Wait until the router completely resets itself. Once it's completely reset, you'll know because there'll be a red light on it that will come on. It takes about 3 or 4 minutes. Turn the router off. Turn your modem off. Plug your modem into the WAN port on the back of the router. Any other things that might have been plugged in the back of your modem, plug them into the other ports on the router. Doesn't matter which ones. But the modem's got to be plugged in to the WAN port or internet port on the back of the router. Then go ahead and turn the router back on and turn the modem back on. It's going to take another 2 or 3 minutes for everything to power up. So settle in for a couple minutes. Don't try and rush this. Then go to one of your computers that's connected to the router. If you don't have a computer connected to the router, I strongly advise you to temporarily connect a computer, hardwire it to the router, and then go through the setup exactly as I just showed the setup on this, which is you can look for the gateway. You can type in on a Netgear router, you can just type in routerlogin.net, or you can just look for the gateway the way I've shown it, and then log into the router that way. After you do that, you just follow the on-screen prompts to set it up the way you want it. You'll set up an admin name and password. For that to take effect, the router needs to restart. You need to re-log in under the new admin name and password. Make sure you write the admin name and password down somewhere, maybe a little post-it note, and stick it on the back of the router, because you will forget it. Most people do. And then you're done. That should be all there is to it. Once you go through the setup, you're going to set up your SSID, your SSID passwords, your router login name and password. Pretty much exactly what you've seen me do on this ASUS router is the exact same for every router. Just the screens look a little different. Should be that easy. Zackstar says he uses a spray bottle with 50% rubbing alcohol and 50% water with a microfiber cloth. So the problem with using that is some monitors have an anti-glare coating, and that rubbing alcohol can take that anti-glare coating right off. I would not use any alcohol-based cleaners on a monitor. Can't strongly recommend that enough. Microfiber will not scratch the screen. Regular cotton or polyester, that will likely put little micro scratches across your screen. Alcohol is not advised. Jeremy in the chat wants to know, Carrie, if your modem is a cable modem / gateway like Xfinity, is there a need to have a router? Well, yes, there are benefits to having a router that is, so when your internet service provider provides you a cable modem and router built in one, it's usually not a good cable modem and not a good router. It's sort of a bare minimum. They're selling these things off by the hundreds of thousands, maybe by the millions, probably by the millions. So they're not putting in high-end stuff. And while the cable modem's probably good enough, the routing side of it's very minimal. So if you're able to connect all your Wi-Fi devices and you can walk around your entire property and you're connecting just fine, yeah, it may not be much benefit for you. On the other hand, if you're only getting 3 bars across the house or on a separate floor, or if you've got a number of Wi-Fi devices and it's slowing things down, if you've got multiple people in the household, maybe somebody's gaming, while at the same time somebody's watching Netflix, while at the same time somebody's, doing emails or whatever, you might notice when everybody's doing stuff in the house, everything gets slower. Then you would benefit in these scenarios with a much better router. And all you have to do is plug your new router into the existing one, in your case from Xfinity. You need to turn it all off. You need to turn the modem off. You need to turn your new router off. Power them back on. I personally would recommend logging into the Xfinity router. There's usually login instructions on a sticker on the bottom. And I would disable the wireless radio on your Xfinity modem router. Just disable the wireless radio on it. Because otherwise you might be competing with 2 wireless, might have a 2.4 and a 5 gigahertz wireless signal coming out of your Xfinity modem router, and then you're going to have a 2.4 and a 5 gigahertz signal coming out of your replacement Wi-Fi router. Your replacement Wi-Fi router may be faster for gaming. It may specialize in things like VPN setups. It may be better range across your entire house, or you might even want to set up a mesh system so you can get to the garage, or you can get to a guest house or a barn, or multiple floors. You can get a much better router than what you're getting from Xfinity. And you just plug that router into your Xfinity router, turn the wireless radio off on the Xfinity, and just use your new Wi-Fi router as your Wi-Fi. It's that easy. But if you're not experiencing any issues with it, if you've got all the range you want and all the speeds you want and you're happy with it, don't fix it if it ain't broke. But by no means think that you've got a good, it's not a good Wi-Fi router. It's the very bare minimum that Xfinity can get away with. Anything more would reduce their profit margin. And anything less would reduce their profit margin. They're giving you what is the bare minimum for them to not be getting support calls all the time and for them to not be charging an arm and a leg for an overkill router that, let's face it, most people really don't understand what their router does. So it's not like we're benefiting the majority of people by encouraging them to upgrade their router. But if you're somebody watching these kind of videos, I suspect you would benefit from a higher end router. Corey says, when I asked your opinion earlier about a router, I meant the AX5400. I got it for 83 pounds on sale. Thought it was a good buy. AX5400. Let's see which one that is. Oh, I've already done a video on that router. That's the router, that's the AX82U. Yes, that's the one that kind of looks like a little UFO. It's a really cool looking router. Mitch is using that one currently. I ended up buying another one because I'm not going to get that one back for Mitch. But let's see. Let me bring up the Windows capture. It's this one right here. Yeah, I like this router a lot. It's not very large, so its physical size is impressive. It's got great range. It's Wi-Fi 6. You'll see it's $177. It's an expensive router, and it doesn't seem like it's on Prime either. It seems a bit pricey. That router shouldn't be that price. What do they have it down here for? I don't see used and new down here for some reason, but I see there's a used one here. Those are accessories. Oh, here, new and used from $119. That's a pretty good price there. Is that coming from Amazon Warehouse? Yes. At $120, it's a really good deal. And at 83 pounds, yeah, I'd say you got a good deal on that router. I like this router, absolutely. And if you go back in my video log of my library, you'll see I did a live review with this router as well. Just as we're doing now with the GT-AC2900 that we're using right now. Yep. Okay, any other questions for me? We're just over 2 hours. I wanted to wrap this up around 2 hours, but I will stick around as long as you guys have questions for me. Obviously, I don't know the answers to all your questions, and when I don't know, I'm going to tell you I don't know. But I do hope if anybody does know in the chat or has an alternative answer or maybe interprets the question differently, please don't be shy in providing your answer in the chat. David Ice says, I went to 1 gig and Spectrum gave me a Wi-Fi 6 router and I had to switch most of my devices to Wi-Fi. Well, you don't have to, but you probably would want to. I mean, otherwise you're paying for a service. If your devices aren't utilizing that service, why are you paying all this extra money for something you're not using? So you'd want to, but you shouldn't have to upgrade your devices to Wi-Fi 6. Scott says, I don't use a router for my internet. I've got fiber and the ONT, the on-network terminal box, there's mounted to my wall, and I plug my mesh system into that. Well, your mesh system is a router, though. That's what the mesh is. Let me scroll up and see what else I might have missed here. Colin wants to know if I'd recommend a VPN to a customer. No, because I don't want to support that. First thing I would need to know is why the customer is requesting a VPN. In most cases, they want it for purposes of bypassing copyright restriction. I absolutely can't put my business in that position of encouraging the theft of property, which is effectively what that is. Most people I know that use VPNs, the overwhelming majority of people, by large and by far, are people that are trying to watch content, television, from a country where it's blocked. So they're emulating being in that country so they can watch that content. That is theft. Now, I'm not the police. I'm not here to enforce laws. I honestly don't care. What I can't do, though, is I can't have my business engage knowingly in something that encourages theft. So if I set something up and I'm setting it up and the customer tells me it's to accomplish this thing and it's, a legit, lawful reason that doesn't put any liability on me, fine. But if I later find out the customer lied to me, then I have to take very careful notes, because if that customer gets busted and they find out that I was an accomplice in this theft, then my company, and the more successful my company is, the bigger of a target it gets for this type of activity. So for that reason, I want to know, why do you want a VPN? And if there's a legitimate reason for it, I will generally come up with an alternate solution that has VPN as part of the service. Like, let's take, for example, I want to remote into my work. Okay, we can use remote software like Instant House Call or other remote software that automatically encrypts the data. No VPN is necessary. It's automatically doing that in the remote software, at least in the remote software I recommend. The VPN will also slow the customer down. So you're going to have likely at least one support call when they go, how come my computer's not as fast as it was? Because you turned on the VPN. I'm trying to think of other reasons people might want a VPN. Somebody might want to set up a VPN tunnel to create their own online storage device. Once again, there are other ways to go about this where you don't have to set it all up yourself. If somebody wanted me to set that up for them, I hope they have a lot of money. So while it may cost you nothing or very little to nothing for you to set it up and go through all the hassle of configuration and both the client and the server side, I have other things to do, and that's too much of a time suck for me to get that all set up, to then tutor the person how to use it and then deal with their support calls. So for that reason, it is not ideal, for all those reasons, for my business to engage in that, but rather to try and solve the customer's problem. So instead of the customer telling me how to solve their problem, I need VPN. No, I don't think you do. Tell me what you need it for. If somebody says, I don't need to tell you what I need it for, well, then you can hire somebody else. I don't need the work. I don't need that. It's not worth me jeopardizing my business and my integrity to make $1. I won't do it. That's not to say that nobody uses VPN for a legit reason, but whenever I talk to anybody who's got a VPN, 9 times out of 10, they want it so they can watch content and go around copyright restrictions. And I don't care. Have at it. But I want nothing to do with that. Don't associate my professional business with that end user garage tech mentality. That's fine for you. Sit at home, do what you want. You're not a big liability. You're not running a business. So I just want to be clear on that. I'm not Mr. Strict to the rules. I'm Mr. I want to stay in business. That's who I am. I'm not gonna, make a few bucks and then turn around and lose tens of thousands of dollars if my business suffers. That's just bad business right there. Blackwatch said some content is tied to regions. So you have to understand the complexity of this, right? Most end users, most consumers don't have a clue how this stuff works. They don't understand what they're doing is theft. They think it's not costing anybody anything. I'm not hurting anybody, but in fact you are. So let's say you buy the rights to redistribute a television show or a television network. And this is big, big, big money. Now, for you to recoup your investment, you charge the people, you're assigned a territory. This is your territory. There will be no competitors. You are the exclusive rights owner to this content in this area. And you're going to pay for that. Now, you can legit resell that service to people within that territory and recoup the millions, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars you would have in investment to pay for the content and to pay for the infrastructure to distribute it. And now you've got people that are going to the person, to the source that you're licensing from, and they're bypassing region blocking settings so they don't have to pay you your money when they live in your region. That's your territory. And now it's all a financial loss for you for all the people that do that. The company that you bought it from, they don't care, right? I mean, they've got it region restricted as a means to the contractual obligation that they're not competing with you in your territory. But when people skirt around that, and when enough people do it, what's going to happen is all we're going to have left is something like YouTube. Because if there's no money to be made in regular commercial TV, if they can't make ends meet, or if the distributors can't make ends meet. There's a whole chain that goes on here, from production companies to the broadcast companies to the parent broadcast companies to the networks themselves. And this is all big, big, big money. When you find out how much your Cox, or I have Cox Internet here, and they provide the television. You might have Xfinity, Spectrum, Roadrunner. When you find out how much your cable TV provider is paying to the networks, I think your jaw's going to drop. When you see your bill keeps going up every month and it's the cable. And oftentimes it's not the cable company, it's the media companies that they have to buy from. When you say, I want the Cartoon Network, and they say, well, to have that, you've got to have the Hallmark and you got to have all these other, I don't want the other channels. Can't I just buy the channels I want? They're not allowed to sell you the channels you want. It's against the contract. They'll be sued out of oblivion. When they buy the packages, they're just reselling those same packages to you. They're not creating their own packages. If you want to get mad at somebody, get mad at the network. Don't get mad at the distributor. So your television provider is just a distributor. And when you notice, like YouTube, local TV is $65 for local TV. Do you know what it costs YouTube to get that local TV rights to redistribute? It's about $65 per license for each viewer. They're like breaking even on it. Can you imagine how many millions of dollars this adds up to. Can you imagine how many millions of dollars it costs to run the cables, to do the endless support, adding customers, taking customers off? I mean, it's endless work. Now, does one customer make a difference if they're going to bypass the region and watch it? No, of course not. But that's also like saying, does one person voting really make a difference in the outcome of the vote? On one hand, absolutely not. If we run an election and one more extra person votes in that election, does it change the outcome? Not at all. But the problem is there's a lot of just one person not voting. There's a lot of just one person VPNing around the restrictions, and the losses are massive financially. So I don't expect that's going to be around any longer than necessary. They will figure out a way to figure this out, and they will absolutely block it, because to not do so, the losses just mount year after year. More and more people spread the information. They tell their friends. People that weren't doing it before are doing it now. And this is going to be a problem soon. So again, I don't care. I just can't get involved with it. But I certainly feel, as a small business owner, what my expenses are. I feel for these large companies that, yeah, they make millions of dollars, but they have millions in expenses and in maintenance. That, well, you should go work for them sometime. Go work for your local ISP or your local television company. In any capacity, you'll be busy. Adoptable Joshi says, TV is meant to be free. You know what else should be free? $1 million should be free. You know, what kind of justification? That's like talking to a child. That should be free. No, absolutely not. If you don't understand the amount of money that goes into a production, you should take a look into what the money's spent on. From lighting to cameras to actors to sets. The set alone can cost so much money. You got to pay script writers and editors. You've got to pay camera operators. You've got to pay grips. You've got to pay for distribution rights. You often have to pay for graphics, whether it's titles or credits. Oh my gosh. $1 million won't make you anything. You're just not going to cut. You're not going to cut a TV show at $1 million. You're not going to do it. Anything under $3 million, about impossible. So if you talk to somebody in another country like England, TV has never, ever been free in England. You have to pay for a license. It's always been that way since day one. So saying something should be free is called entitlement, and it's very, very disconnected from reality. And I just feel like that's the mentality of a child who just doesn't understand the value of things. But believe what you want to believe. It doesn't change the reality. And if that's what you want to tell yourself to get away with theft, have at it. I don't care. But very childish attitude. Scott wants to know, why do they have VPNs if it's not legit? So VPNs are often used in lieu of other solutions. Where they're used most often is in corporations. So say, for example, you're running a large company like Intel, or your local power provider, or your water treatment plant. You have hundreds, if not thousands, of employees. And you have both an internal, what we call an intra-web, and then you have an interweb for your customers. But you sort of have an internal website for administering, doing the work within the confines of being an employee. Then you have the external website for the general public, right? So you've got to maintain all of this, and you've got to protect yourself from attacks. The bigger the company is, the more likely it's being attacked. Big companies are attacked all the time. Hackers looking for a way in, looking to put in ransomware, looking to exploit things like hospitals and things like that. But you might also need the ability to remotely monitor some of the equipment. You might need employees to be able to remote in, and we're not simply going to use remote access software. We need more controls. We need to record and log every employee and when they log in, and under certain restrictions, otherwise they're not getting in, and that helps keep the hackers out. So in that case, they'll have big corporate VPNs, often through provided by Cisco or some of the big networking companies. For why a home user would want a VPN legitimately, again, likely because they want to have access to their own cloud, which in most cases involves copyrighted material they've downloaded illegally, right? Movies and music. With today being able to use things like Spotify completely for free, there's no reason to pirate music anymore, let alone to pay to store it. With streaming services, like whether it's Amazon Prime or Peacock or Hulu, it's just not financially sound anymore to download the content and store it yourself and then put it on a server and then open that up to the world and then want to secure it through a VPN. So you're effectively protecting what you've stolen. It's like you're saying, I don't want anybody to take what I've stolen, so I want to lock it down. That's what it is. But it doesn't mean there's no legitimate reason for VPN. But generally speaking, outside of a corporate environment, the vast majority of people, home users using VPNs, are doing it to steal content. That's just fact. Now, there are legitimate uses for it in a home use scenario, but very few people that I've encountered in my business are using it for a legit purpose. And if a consumer were to approach me and say, how could I accomplish this securely, this task I want to do, that's totally legit, without using a VPN, I could provide them that answer depending on what the problem is. I've never had to put a VPN in to solve any problem for any client, ever. Again, I don't want to deal with the support side of things. It's an ongoing expense, and it becomes an ongoing expense for me to have to support it when there's other ways to accomplish the task that are much, much easier, much less complicated, and don't come at the cost of the bandwidth deficit. I've seen my bandwidth get cut in half on a VPN. Trying to get one Synology to back up to another Synology, ideally we're going to do that through a VPN tunnel. But in doing that, bandwidth gets cut in half, so the backups take longer. But that would be a legit reason why a home user might have a Synology at home and a Synology at the office, and they have them automatically synchronized, assuming they have the bandwidth to support that. Most of my clients create far more data than they could back up in one evening. But it depends on the business. Jeremy in the chat wants to know, what are the 3 most important features you would consider a router must have? For me personally, I need that USB port. I want the option of meshing the router. So that takes Netgear right out of the running. And I need it to support beamforming. That is absolutely not negotiable. Beamforming is what's going to increase your range and ultimately your performance of your Wi-Fi. So those would be the 3 minimum things that I would demand. Now, I do have an REX 120 that does not support mesh. None of the Netgear routers support mesh unless it's a mesh system. And it bothers me. And I'm really considering switching it out. I know what the problem is. So the signal, well, it does reach the opposite end here of Studio B. It gets to like 3 bars, which is a bare minimum. But the problem is the router is situated against the far edge of the house. If I can move the router to the middle of the house, I wouldn't need the mesh system. But if I leave the router where it is and put another one in the opposite corner in a mesh, or even maybe not that far, it sort of depends on the mesh system, but then I would have 5 bars everywhere. That also means that it'll go out further to the street. So if somebody was driving by and they wanted to try and hack in, they could try. My security is always good though, they're not getting anywhere. But that's the downside, is I would have a very strong signal inside the house, which means it's gonna bleed outside the house even further. But it's a quiet neighborhood. If I was in an apartment, that would be more concerning. If anything, I might want to put the transmit power down and not broadcast as strongly, because I could have neighbors that just hack at me all day, every day with nothing else better to do, and I would have no idea it's happening. Now, likely, they'll never get in, but well, I'll tell you what, if they got their heart set on it and they got nothing else better to do, it may just be a matter of time. Kenton Morton in the chat says, with all the routers Kerry has, he can make a mega mesh. Good. That's true. Flipper Flop says, legit reasons would be security and privacy for using a VPN. It can help protect your data when using public Wi-Fi by encrypting your connection and making it more difficult for others to intercept your data. This is true. However, when you're using public Wi-Fi, you shouldn't be doing anything on it regardless that involves money or anything, financial or private, because there are security cameras that could be looking at your screen right over your shoulder. So this idea that you're more secure is really security theater. People that think they're going to get away with something by using a VPN still often get caught. VPNs do not provide the amount of security that the general public online would have you believe. And in general, when you're on a Wi-Fi that doesn't belong to you, I don't care if you're paying for it. If you go to a hotel and they're charging you for the Wi-Fi, that is still a public Wi-Fi point. You could be connecting to a man in the middle, you would never know. There could be somebody snooping, eavesdropping, you would never know. So you say, well, I can use a VPN. Well, here's a better idea. Just log into your computer at home. That creates the VPN with the remote software, like Instant House Call, or LogMeIn, or TeamViewer, any of them. They create their own encryption point to point. Then do all your work on the remote system. Then you're all encrypted. You can do all the financial transactions, but bear in mind, people can still look over your shoulder, even with cameras that might be around you don't notice. And if their intent is to do you harm, you're giving the whole store away, regardless of how you're connected. I see people do this with credit cards, right? Or before the pandemic, people have a problem with their credit card. They call their credit card company while they're in line at the store. And they're going through all the security questions on their phone where everybody can hear them. Are they insane? When I hand my credit card to a server at a restaurant, quite often they walk away with it. I don't know. Are they making a copy of it? What are they doing with my credit card? I don't know what they're doing with it. If you ever see, when you go to a restaurant, more and more common, they're bringing the little point of sale unit to your table and they never touch your credit card. Once again, because of the pandemic primarily, but you put the credit card in the machine, you hit the OK button, set your tip amount, it says remove your card, and the server can print the receipt out right there and give it to you. Or they have little payment kiosks like at Chili's and Applebee's where you just pay right there. So nobody's walking away with your credit card. But at least the credit card does have security built into it, where if the numbers do get stolen, you're only liable for like $50 of it. Yeah, it bothers me when I pay a bill and somebody walks away with my credit card and I can't see them. You have no idea how much that bothers me. But that's why I won't use a debit card, because a debit card, it's coming out of my checking account. And if they're stealing money from me, I'm liable for up to $500 of it. With a credit card, they're stealing money from the bank. It's not coming from me. Sure, it's my balance, but I just call and report it. They can issue me a new credit card. I don't have to wait for money to be redeposited back in my checking account, which may postpone my ability to get my bills paid on time. So for security, I will use a credit card. And if they walk away with it, they walk away with it. I don't say anything. But in my mind, if they're gone too long, I'm concerned. But I never, ever will do that with a debit card. Never. So a lot of times people worry, the point of what I was trying to say is that sometimes people worry about the technical side of the security, but they completely forget about the social side. So you could, for example, have this amazing alarm system on your house. This thing can hear a mouse fart and it'll set it off. But then someone knocks on your door when you're home. They say, hey, I'm from the power company. I'm from the water company. Can we come in and check this? And you let them in. You never gave your burglar alarm a chance. That was all a waste of money because they just social engineered their way into your house. And there's no technology that can help you from making bad decisions. So if you're going to continue to make bad decisions, it doesn't matter how you think you're protecting yourself, because in all likelihood, all you're doing is getting an emotional, what's the word? It's an emotional solution. It's not an actual solution. People are emotionally like, oh, I'm protected because I got a VPN. People think they can avoid getting swatted if they use a VPN when they're gaming. Clearly don't understand how swatting works. It has nothing at all to do with VPN. But there are people that believe this and they tell it to each other on Reddit. That's why, oh, you got swatted because you weren't on a VPN. Nothing to do with being swatted. So there's so much misinformation. There's a serious lack of understanding how TCP/IP works, how packets work, how social engineering works. And so people get the answer, but they can't explain to you why that's the answer. And when you try to explain it to them, a lot of times they're not going to listen. So what I like to do, rather than feed a man a fish, I want to teach a man to fish. I want you to understand why we do the things we do, not just to do them because it's good, but to understand what makes it good. How does this work? Why are we doing it? Explain to me the difference with the way that data travels and how that makes us less secure than encryption. This idea that encryption is making you safer, it totally doesn't take into account your own behavior socially. Or the fact that when you're in a public area with cameras, I can't emphasize this enough, those cameras can read your screens. And, you know, most security people are great people, but they're generally not college degreed people in security. So they might be more prone to go job to job. They might be more prone to seizing an opportunity. Maybe. I'm not suggesting simply because somebody doesn't have a certain level of education that they might be prone to theft, because clearly there's white-collar theft coming from well-educated people that's into the massive millions and millions of, I mean, big stuff. Don't even get me started with like Bitphoenix or whatever that company's name, that whole crypto scam thing. Oh, man, that's so offensive to me. But I will say that people that hop job to job might be more desperate, and therefore, because of the desperation, or perhaps they just don't like working. And, you know, when they're in security, they might be in security because of their physical size, not because they got a special degree in security. Now, when we talk about cybersecurity, when we're talking about, you know, setting up IT infrastructure, that absolutely requires a certain level of education to get into that job. When we're talking about when you walk in the bank and you see the old man sitting on the chair, and he's got a gun and he says hello to you, he's really not going to be much help if somebody comes in there with a gun. He's also probably not going to steal anything from you. But when you talk about somebody who's perhaps younger, a bit more desperate, they might be in a position where they're monitoring security cameras. There have been scams, elaborate scams, where there was like a gas station and people would go in, they'd say, you know, don't use your credit card at the pump because they have all the skimmers, the card skimmers. Go in and pay for it. But what was happening was this person that works the security cameras and the person that works the register had it set up so that when the person put their debit card in and typed in their PIN, they were skimming the card. The cashier was doing the skimming and the person in the security booth was seeing the PIN. And then they could just print up their own blank magnetic cards and start using it to make purchases. And these were employees. This isn't common, but it does happen. And again, another reason not to use your debit card, because that money comes directly out of your checking account. Use a credit card. Let them take it from the bank. That's as far as I'm concerned. And also your liability is less with a credit card. Devious says, are you dropping your Nighthawk router? Well, so right now I'm using the ASUS, I'm using the ET12 right now. And I'm very impressed with its Wi-Fi speed. It is good. But the lack of a USB port and the lack of 2 additional LAN ports is unacceptable. So the router's useless for my needs. But I just wanted to evaluate it. Before that, I had the GT-6000. That's a great router. I got no complaints. But I still do like my Netgear RAX 120, which I will put back. However, I don't think it's going to be here very long. The fact that it lacks that mesh option really bothers me. And it's weird because I can't say for sure I would use it. I know if I simply move the router more to the middle of the building, I probably will solve the lower Wi-Fi signal that I'm getting on the other end of the house. I am still getting a signal, but I want 5 bars everywhere. Anything less than 5 bars, I'll take 4. Okay, if I can get 4, that's fine. But when I get to 3, for a customer, that's good enough unless the customer has an issue with it. But for me, I want 5 everywhere. And I know with a basic mesh system, this house is pretty small. I can get 5 bars with just a mesh point and a satellite or a node. So if I could just get 2 RAX 120s and put them in mesh mode, that would be ideal. But I cannot because Netgear doesn't support that on their routers. But very rarely do I see mesh routers that offer a USB port unless you can spend a whole ton of money. So my choice is either move the router more centrally, which requires cabling, or wait till a more powerful router comes out, like the Wi-Fi 7 routers, and maybe they'll just solve the problem. Even though there's no benefit for me to have Wi-Fi 6E, let alone Wi-Fi 7, the internal antennas and the way that they transmit their signal will likely be an improvement, and it may be all I need. I just need a little bit of boost, just a little bit of boost. Yeah. But I am getting a signal across the house regardless. But the signal is not 5 bars at the other end. And I want it to be 5 bars. It's just what I want. So my initial plan was to use 2 RAX 120s, put one, leave one here and put one in the other room, mesh them together. I just assumed Netgear offered the same thing TP-Link and ASUS does with that option, but they don't, not at all. It angers me. No good reason for Netgear not to support that. Gary Tatum said, I heard LastPass had a data breach. LastPass has had 2 or 3 data breaches in the last 2 years. Loke in the chat room says, security starts and ends with the user. This is true. The technology is there to help you, but it's not there to replace it. It's no different than you buy a Volvo, right? That's supposed to be the safest car, the Volvo. So does that mean you don't have to learn how to drive? Does that mean you can just make really stupid decisions on the road and you're not going to be injured or killed in a car accident because you're in a Volvo? No, it absolutely does not mean that at all. You still have to take responsibility for your actions, and you have to understand the consequences of any unnecessary risks that you're taking. You can't just get a get-out-of-jail-free card because you bought a nicer car. Tesla is supposedly right up at the top in crash testing for the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. So does this mean if I drive a Tesla, I don't have to learn how to drive and I can do whatever the hell I want to? Because that's what people think when they put antivirus on their computer. That's often what people think when they put a VPN on their computer. They think they're lawless now and they don't have to educate themselves. I just put this little magic piece of software on and I can do whatever the heck I want to do. It doesn't work like that. But that is the common mentality of the end user. Some end users find out the hard way. I'd prefer you didn't. I'd prefer you totally understood what to expect and what the limitations are. But it's absolutely correct and very well stated that security starts and ends with the end user, just as car safety starts and ends with the driver. Paying attention, driving a safe speed, driving responsibly, especially when you have other people in your car. You're responsible for their lives. I think that requires the respect of paying attention to the road and not doing stupid things on the road. Do that to yourself. Don't involve other drivers and don't involve your passengers. It's just taking people's lives. It's potentially murder or attempted murder, even if that wasn't the intent. If the intent was, let's have fun and be stupid. There's plenty of people in the ground now because of that. It does tend to be the behavior of younger people. What am I missing? Richard has been a member for 7 months. Right on, Richard. Thanks for supporting the channel and being a member since the beginning. There's Zdravko. Oh, I already talked about that one. So a shout out and a thank you again to Planet Cryos, to Find Me in Hawaii, to Bob R., to 3D Everything, Jeremy Kramer, Richard, and Zdravko for your support, your contributions. Thank you to all my friends in blue for keeping it civil in the chat room. I've locked it down so that anybody who wants to chat has to be a subscriber for at least 1 minute. And that means if they want to come in here and they want to harass me or they want to advertise, at least I get a subscriber out of it. And then you're just going to ban them anyway. I still get the subscriber. So I wish I'd have thought of this a long time ago, because that's been wonderful. Of course, we still have members only Mondays. So the people you see in green are with the little gold medallion next to their name, often with a number in it. The number shows how many months they've been a member. And the members only Mondays are much smaller videos, maybe a couple dozen people. And they're really intended to just be us talking. Those videos will never be made to the public, to the general public, but will always be available to new members to go back and see what they've missed in previous members only. Those are members only Mondays videos. They're always at 1 o'clock. My live videos are always Friday at 1 o'clock. And then during the week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, sometimes on a weekend, if time permits, I go live. I'm trying to go live more often. I'm sort of having to balance my time between my day job, which is supporting, repairing computers and my customers, with doing this. So there's been a couple Fridays where, boy, I didn't think I was going to get a show done. It can be a lot because I don't have any employees. I have to do everything myself. If I have to leave to get a haircut, I cannot help my customers, nor can I do a YouTube video, right? So little simple things we do in our lives impact my ability of what I can get done that day. And because I'm self-employed, if I don't get any work done that day, I did not make any money that day. So that's a lot for me to balance. But I am trying to find ways to balance my time better so I can make more YouTube videos. So at the very least, I'm dedicated to Mondays at 1 for my members and Fridays at 1 for everybody else. Any other day that I broadcast, it's as time permits. Now, if you want to know when I'm going live, subscribe. Make sure you turn your notifications on. Make sure you go in your YouTube settings of your account and see how you've told YouTube you want to be notified. Beyond that, you can follow me on Twitter. You can also follow me on Facebook, where I often post links ahead of time for the upcoming videos. Not always, but often. And that's all free for you to do. And what else? Tomorrow, I think I'm going to show a setup of a Synology NAS. An introductory NAS, a cheap one, intended for somebody who's never had one before. It's not a massive amount of investment. It's very useful for storing all your files, like a large vault, if you will, a data vault. And of course, it's got a lot of features such as creating your own cloud, using it as a video recording device for security cameras around your building or your house, automatic backup of all the computers on your network to the NAS, where it's just all hands off. It'll do it automatically. There's so many things to go over with the Synology, and we'll go through that. Again, there's people that use that for copyright violation stuff. We're not going to explore that for the reasons I've already explained, but I will show you legitimate reasons why people use these services and why they are offered. They're not offered for making your media available to you wherever you travel. I know people who do that, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with it. When I have a problem was when they call me and ask me why it stopped working. I don't know. I don't do that. I want nothing to do with it. So you do that, you're on your own to fix it. There's Google, have at it. But other than that, that's what I'm planning for tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Saturday, as a reminder, Mitch Morrison will be back. And we're going to just have a little New Year's get together. We're just going to hang out, and we're not going to do any work. We'll just hang out. Hopefully you'll join us then. That'll be at 1 o'clock, my usual start time. Of course, when I say 1 o'clock, I'm in Phoenix. And Phoenix never moves their clock forward or backward. We do not honor daylight saving time. So oftentimes I will tell you the time when I post it online. I'll usually say it's 12 p.m. Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern. But it's not always. In the spring, it'll be the same time as Arizona. Pacific time will be the same because they'll move up an hour. So 1 o'clock here will be 1 o'clock there. But the East Coast also will move up an hour. So instead of 3 o'clock, it'll be 4 o'clock. Good old daylight saving time. But here in Phoenix, it's always 1 o'clock. When it's 1 o'clock, it never changes. And yeah, so at the very least, without notifications, you know, as a member, there will always be a live video on Monday at 1 o'clock. And for everybody, there'll be a live video on Friday at 1 o'clock. And then as time permits me to make videos throughout the week or the weekend, I will, as I've been doing. So hopefully I'll be able to get a third day permanently scheduled in, but it just requires ideally a permanent studio for me to move to that next step. I can't do it while I'm in limbo. I'm in flux in my studio situation. And I hope I get that worked out in 2023, sooner rather than later, because it's preventing me from moving forward. Until I get that problem solved, I can't fix the next problem. So that's what's going on over here. I hope everybody had a wonderful holiday, if this is the first I've seen you since then. If you haven't subscribed or watched Doug Bett's live Windows training, highly recommend it. If you enjoy this kind of content, Doug is also a real working computer technician with over 30 years of experience. And his channel's still fairly new, so you can get in now before it gets super popular. And I'll be sure to add a link to that, but you can also just type in Doug Bett's Windows training in YouTube search, should pull up his channel. But I will add a link to that in today's video notes. It's not in there right now, but when I've wrapped up for today, I will add it. There's really good technical education and examples that he, will tell you stories about past computer problems, and then we'll diagnose live on YouTube consumers' problems, other viewers, and even his own issues or his client machines he'll bring in, and he'll save the diagnostic and repair for when he's on camera. That's so much better than the paid for or sponsored stuff the big tech channels do, in my opinion, because it's real. And then $5 just came in from Find Me in Hawaii. Thank you again for the contributions. And just looking in the chat here. Yeah, I hope you'll see me tomorrow at 1 o'clock. And I certainly hope you'll all be back Saturday at 1 o'clock, and we'll celebrate the end of 2022. Close that out, take a look back on the year, and look forward to the new year. And hopefully more changes in a positive direction. I will see you all again very, very soon. Until next time, bye for now.